Hey guys, tonight we're bundling up for a chilly walk back in time to a medieval village where the walls don't quite meet the roof, the fires mostly smoke, and winter shows up not with a bang, but a long, aching crawl. Picture this. You wake up to a rooster crowing inside your house, your breath misting visibly in the air, and your feet already stiff from cold before they've even left the straw mattress. And just to set the mood, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to hear where you're watching from and what time it is for you, so drop that in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up one morning and something's just different. It's not a thunderclap or a blizzard that announces winter in your medieval hamlet. It's a feeling. Your joints creak a little louder. The damp straw under your sleeping mat doesn't warm up like it usually does. Your breath? It hovers in the air like a lazy ghost before disappearing into the half-dark room. The sun takes its sweet time rising, casting that washed-out blue across your wooden walls, if you're lucky enough to even have walls. You roll out of bed wearing your day clothes, because you also wore them to sleep, and tiptoe over the dirt floor, already sensing that this will be the kind of morning where your fingers never quite thaw. Outside, the animals are huddled close together. The pigs grunt irritably. The chickens are unusually quiet, and even the dog is still curled in a tight little loaf, refusing to move. Something in the air tells everyone the same thing. The long, cold season is knocking. You take your first sip of thin ale, which feels colder than the well water it replaced, and try to warm your hands by cupping it. The fire's long out, of course. No one gets up in the middle of the night to keep feeding it, not when wood is scarcer than good teeth around here. You tell yourself you'll get it started soon. Later, maybe. Your breath fogs again as you step outside to the privy, basically a plank over a pit, and notice the rim of frost along the grass. It's not quite ice, not yet, but it's the kind of morning where you know it's coming. Soon you'll be breaking the frozen crust on the water trough with a stick and using your own body heat to keep your shoes from stiffening. Historians still argue whether peasants could accurately track seasonal shifts without almanacs or clocks, but your bones don't need a calendar to know what's ahead. The cold settles like an unpaid debt, slowly, relentlessly. And it's only the beginning. You know it's coming. You may not have a calendar or a weather report, but your body, your neighbors, and the goats all agree. The freeze is settling in. So, with creaky knees and a kind of stubborn calm, you start preparing, not in the dramatic stocking up for an apocalypse way, no. This is a quiet scramble, stretched over weeks, where the goal isn't comfort, it's survival. The first order of business. Firewood, which sounds simple until you realize you live in a place where trees are shared, regulated, or outright forbidden to peasants. You and your oldest son, or your cousin, who's technically not allowed near axes anymore, head into the nearby woods with a small handcart and a larger hope. You're not cutting down anything grand, of course, just deadfall scraps. Twigs and branches and anything that won't land you in trouble with the Lord's forester. You gather in silence mostly, save for the occasional sneeze or curse when the woodpile topples or your foot sinks into icy muck. Once back, you stack the wood neatly under a lean-to next to the cottage. Well, you try. The lean-to leaks, the wood's half-soaked, and the pig keeps nosing at the bottom row, but it's something. Better than nothing. The plan is to use it sparingly. One fire in the morning to break the ice, one in the evening to fight the dread. Next, you patch the roof. This is a two-person job, best done by someone who doesn't mind heights, splinters, or being poked in the ribs with straw bundles. That someone is probably you. Climbing onto the thatch with a bundle under one arm, you crawl like a cold, clumsy spider, weaving new straw into the brittle old mat that's supposed to keep the warmth in and the weather out. Historians still debate how effective these repairs actually were, But whether it's effective or not, you do it anyway, because not doing it just feels like giving up. Inside the cottage, preparations are even more subtle. Your spouse starts digging out extra layers from the chest at the foot of the bed. Ragged wool shirts, some barely stitched together, are laid out and assessed like treasure. The children are told to stop growing. The baby is wrapped like a sausage in layers of linen, wool, and last year's bed sack. Outside, you trade. One of your hens goes to the neighbor for a scrap of an old blanket they swear is made from real Flemish wool, though it smells suspiciously like turnip. You mend holes in your boots with twine and leftover leather scraps. The shoemaker's a mile away, and your feet can't afford the trip. Everything is slow. Everything is makeshift, but it's happening. Winter might not crash in like a storm, but you're not caught sleeping. Well, not yet. You're building your defenses against a season that doesn't care, and hoping, quietly, that they hold. You don't talk about it much, not out loud. But the truth is, winter isn't just something you feel on your skin. It settles behind your eyes, in your chest, in that tightening knot in your stomach when the sun starts setting before supper. Cold is one thing. Dread is another, and this time of year, they walk hand in hand. There's a heaviness in the village now. It's in the way people nod silently at each other instead of chatting, in how the kids laugh less and start clinging more, in how the old men sit longer near the fading hearth, rubbing their knees, staring through the smoke like they're already halfway into February. You don't blame them. Some won't make it through, and everyone knows it. Food is tighter, meals are smaller, everyone eats slower, chewing longer than they need to, trying to trick their stomach into thinking it's full. You've hidden some dried beans under a loose floor plank. You check them daily, not because they've gone anywhere, but because it makes you feel like you still have something to control, and then there's the waiting. You wait for the next frost, the next snowfall, the next illness to sweep through the cottages. Every cough sounds louder in winter. Every wheeze means someone might be down by morning. The healer's already busy tending chilblains and cracked skin. There's no medicine, not really, just warm poultices and whispered prayers. Historians still argue whether medieval people feared winter as much as we imagine. But when you're here, in it, the fear is more than rational. It's daily. You feel it when the last candle burns out, when your kid wakes up shivering beside you and you realize the fire's gone cold again. You wonder, not for the first time, if it's colder than last year, or if you've just forgotten how hard it always is. Sleep doesn't come easy either, not when your thoughts keep circling like a hungry wolf. Will the roof hold under heavy snow? Did the neighbor take too much wood from the shared pile? What happens if the baby gets a fever? There's no end in sight yet. No crocus buds, no sun breaking through frost-laced trees, just more cold mornings, stiff joints, and the brittle hope that your preparations were enough. So you go quiet. You stare at the fire, fingers tucked into your armpits for warmth, and breathe slow. Not because it helps much, but because panicking takes energy. And you don't have that to spare. You wake before the rooster, which isn't saying much. He's probably frozen in place. The light outside is gray and stingy, barely crawling over the windowsill. The fire's out, of course, leaving only the faintest line of ash like a grave for yesterday's warmth. You inhale and see your breath again, but this time it seems denser, slower. That's how you know. The first frost has arrived. You step outside and it crunches beneath your boots, though calling them boots is generous. They're more like stitched together apologies for shoes, but they still manage to keep most of the mud off your toes. Today, though, it's not mud, it's frozen solid. The earth has hardened overnight and the world has gone slick and sharp. The leaves you forgot to rake, because, well, no one rakes, are now stiff, curled things glazed in ice. Even the turnip patch glitters menacingly. It's beautiful in a way. A kind of cruel, breath-snatching beauty. The grass sparkles like it's been sugared. The roof has a delicate lace of frost that'll probably melt into leaks by mid-morning. The water trough has a skin of ice you poke with a stick until it finally cracks like glass. You can't help but sigh. not out of awe. Out of resignation. The children are slower to rise. You don't blame them. You don't feel like moving either, but there are animals to feed, and chores that don't get done just because the temperature dropped. You wrap a shawl around your neck and grab a basket for eggs, if the hens bothered laying any. Some mornings they rebel and huddle together in a pile of feathers, glaring as if to say, "Try laying an egg in this weather." Back inside, someone is trying to reignite the hearth. It takes several tries. The kindling is still damp, and your breath fogs around your hands as you blow gently on the flickering flame. Finally it catches, a lazy, reluctant burn. You huddle close, pretending it's enough. Historians still debate how much frost really affected day-to-day work in early winter. But for you, this changes everything. It means hauling water will take twice as long. It means aches in your joints from the damp. It means keeping the baby bundled in wool all day and hoping the rats haven't found the grain stash. There's also the psychological shift. You've been bracing for this. Now it's here, and with it, the unspoken understanding that things get harder from this point forward. The next frost will be thicker. The next one after that, longer. Snow is coming. It always does. But frost is the polite warning tap at the door, the reminder that your window of preparation is slamming shut, so you carry on. You milk the goat with stiff fingers, collect a pitiful number of eggs, and trudge back into your house, where every breath still mists. It's only frost, but it's only just begun. You're not inside, not really. Sure, there are walls. Sort of. You've got a roof overhead, though whether it qualifies as waterproof or just water-suggestive depends on the wind. And technically, there's a door. But that door is made of uneven planks lashed together with rope and good intentions, and it doesn't so much close as lean aggressively into place. And when the wind picks up, it whistles through the gaps like it's auditioning for a haunted choir. The drafts don't just sneak in, they parade. You feel them on the back of your neck while you're kneeling at the hearth. They lick at your ankles when you're sitting by the fire. They tumble down from the rafters, curl in under the door, and sometimes blow straight up through the gaps in the floorboards, which is impressive considering the floor is just dirt. Somehow the cold finds you from every direction, like a very determined ghost. There's a kind of low-level grudge you hold against the wind. It has no manners. It doesn't knock. It just barges into your cottage and rifles through your warmth like it owns the place. You stuff rags into the cracks in the shutters, wedge old cloth around the doorframe, and still, it finds a way. There are nights when you're certain you've sealed everything tight, but then you hear that soft, fluting hum from somewhere above. That's the wind slipping through the thatch again, performing a little tune on the eaves just to mock your efforts. Historians still argue whether peasants truly lived in homes open to the elements, or if that's an exaggeration from snooty estate records. But standing in your own kitchen with your hair lifting slightly from a draft that no one else can even find, the answer seems pretty obvious. Even the fireplace isn't safe. You'd think a stone hearth would offer some protection, but when the wind's wrong, it sends the smoke curling right back into the room. You try to adjust the flue, by which you mean poking at a stick wedged under a rock, and mutter a few words you hope the baby can't understand. Your eyes sting. The dog sneezes. The wind howls once, delighted with itself. The children start inventing new ways to block the cracks. One wedges a chunk of dried clay into a knothole in the wall. Another hangs a damp cloak over the worst corner, which now drips water and regret. It doesn't work. Nothing really works, but somehow you do feel better trying. You wrap your shawl tighter and sit with your back to the wall, because at least this spot is only cold from 3 sides instead of 4. It's not a room, it's a suggestion of shelter, and yet it's yours. You huddle in and hope the wind gets bored. You'd think a floor would offer some kind of boundary, a final defense against the cold, or at least a flat surface to stand on. Not here. In your cottage, the floor is dirt, not compacted earth or packed clay, just dirt. Mud when it rains, dust when it doesn't, and when the temperature dips below freezing, It's a bumpy, crunchy tundra you try to pretend is charming. You throw straw over it to make things bearable. This isn't hay. Don't confuse the two, or your neighbor will spend 10 minutes lecturing you on livestock feed versus foot insulation. The straw doesn't make the floor soft exactly, but it keeps your bare heels from going numb quite as fast when you step out of bed. You layer it thickest near the hearth and the bed, which makes it look like someone tried to carpet the place using barn sweepings. In a way, they did. Of course, straw has a lifespan, a very short one. By the second or third day, it starts to smell faintly of smoke and something worse. After a week, it crunches with a suspicious dampness, and you know it's time to rake it out and replace it if you have more straw. If the pigs didn't get into the last bundle. If the thatch doesn't need it more. The real challenge is when snow finds its way in. Not a drift, not yet, but those sneaky little flakes that fall sideways during a storm and melt on the warmer bits of the dirt floor, which then turn to sludge. You step in it at midnight, and it soaks your foot through the hole in your sock. You curse gently into the darkness, trying not to wake the baby, and grab a straw bundle to blot it dry. It doesn't work. It never does. Historians still puzzle over how peasant homes managed moisture, given their proximity to livestock and lack of drainage. One theory suggests trenches were dug around the walls to channel water. Another proposes slightly raised beds. All you know is you dig little grooves in the mud with your heel and hope the puddles follow your guidance like obedient rivers. They don't. Your feet are always dirty. Always. You gave up trying to wash them months ago. The children's toes are brown year-round. And that's not from tanning. It's from the strange stew of dirt, ash, and whatever mystery goo the chicken tracked in. It's a fact of life. The dog sleeps in the same spot every night and has literally shaped a dog-sized divot in the floor. You envy that kind of commitment. Even your bed legs start to rot from the moisture. You stuff more straw under them, prop one corner with a rock, and shift your weight so it doesn't creak. Not because you're worried it'll break, just because if it wakes the baby, you'll have to walk across that cold, sticky floor again. At a certain point, you stop being surprised by the weather coming inside. Snow, especially, doesn't seem to recognize boundaries. You hear the wind shift, the soft huff of flakes against the roof, and you already know some of it will end up on the inside of your home. It's not dramatic. It's not like a cartoon blizzard blowing the door off its hinges. It's more like slow, inevitable seepage. Snow just appears like an uninvited relative who never announces their arrival. It starts near the windows naturally. The shutters are wooden slats that don't quite align, leaving enough room for snowflakes to flirt their way in. You try covering the gaps with cloth, maybe a bit of waxed leather if you're fancy, but it doesn't last. By morning, a thin dusting of snow forms on the windowsill, and you brush it off like breadcrumbs. No big deal. But then it makes its way further in, onto your sleeping mat, into your shoes, across the hearthstones. A few flakes float down from the rafters, and you glance up to find the thatch roof has decided to offer decorative ventilation again. There's always a gap you missed during the last patching, always. You send one of the kids up to stomp around the roof and press down the straw again. This is, of course, both ineffective and wildly entertaining. They come back in grinning, their boots covered in snow, and you sigh because now there's even more snow inside, this time with footprints. The snow gets tracked across the straw, turns into slush near the fire, and then dries into little salt lines that look like medieval chalk outlines. Historians still debate whether medieval peasant homes had smoke holes or actual chimneys at this time. You don't care what they were supposed to have. You have a hole. And yes, it lets smoke out. And yes, it lets snow in. You sometimes imagine a snowflake's journey, falling through the hole, catching a draft, doing a lazy spin over the fire pit, and finally settling in your bowl of broth like it belongs there. The real fun begins at night. You tuck everyone in, layer every blanket and old coat you can find, and then, just as you're drifting off, plop, a flake lands on your forehead, or worse, on your nose. One time, a whole handful slid off a rafter beam right into the cradle, The baby blinked like it had been blessed by a frosty saint. You don't panic anymore. You just sigh, wrap your cloak tighter, and shovel snow out of the doorway before it turns into a slick death trap by morning. Snow indoors isn't a crisis. It's just part of life now. Like squeaky bed frames, smoky porridge, and your neighbor's goat that keeps wandering inside because your latch is broken again. This is your winter, not just cold. But inside cold, you bundle up and try to remember that eventually spring shows up, just not today. If you'd told your past self that dung would one day be your best friend, you'd have laughed. Or cried. But here you are, in the dead of winter, relying on cow pies and pig droppings to keep the cold out and the heat in. It's not glamorous. It's not exactly pleasant, but it's effective, kind of. You start with the walls. The wind has a talent for finding every last crack and crevice in your home, and straw alone isn't enough to keep it out, so you get creative. You mix mud with manure, cow or horse if you're lucky, pig if you're desperate, and press it into the wall gaps like some kind of medieval caulk. It dries stiff and crumbly, yes, and it doesn't smell great, but once it sets, it works surprisingly well. You seal your cottage like a giant pie crust, just savory. Then there's the floor. It's already dirt and straw, so adding manure doesn't seem like a big step down. You spread a thin layer of animal dung along the base, especially in the corners, packing it down with a flat stone or the heel of your boot. It might sound gross, and it is, but when it freezes, it becomes rock solid, like rustic cement. Some people even claim it insulates, though that may be generous. What it does do is keep the wind from blowing up through the floor and turning your ankles into icicles. Historians still question how widespread these dung sealing methods really were. Some claim it was common in wetter climates. Others argue it's folklore exaggerated by later writers. But whether it's backed by academic consensus or not, here in your house it works, sort of. As long as the smell doesn't bother you, which by now it doesn't. You've been nose-blind since mid-November. There's even a kind of pride in your dung craftsmanship. You make small improvements each winter. This year, you tried mixing in straw for better structure. Last year, someone suggested adding ash to keep bugs out. You're not sure it helped, but it looked fancy. The kids made little handprints in the fresh wall patch near the door. It's insulation and art, really. Of course, visitors wrinkle their noses. Not that you have many in the winter. But if a passing traveler ends up inside, they tend to stand very still and breathe shallowly. You offer them the warmest spot by the fire, and they shuffle over like they're standing in a cowshed, which in some ways they are. But hey, you're warm, or at least warmer than you'd be without your aromatic wall paste. And when the wind howls outside and the snow creeps in through the roof, you can still look around your half-dark room and feel, dare you say it, snug. It may stink a little, but survival rarely smells like roses. The word layering takes on a whole new meaning in winter, not in the sleek, modern way with matching thermals and insulated coats, but more like wrapping yourself in everything you own and hoping for the best. This is the art of ragpiling, a time-honored survival technique honed over years of freezing and improvising. You start with your underlayer, which used to be your good shirt 2 years ago before the elbows wore out and your cousin used it to swaddle a goat. It's linen, technically. It smells like fire and onions. Over that goes the patched wool tunic, only slightly itchy now that you've worn it for 10 straight days. Then a second tunic, thicker, heavier, with sleeves that hang past your fingertips. That one used to belong to your father. Or your neighbor. It's hard to keep track anymore. Trousers are no easier. One pair doesn't cut it. You wear 2, sometimes 3. If you're really lucky, someone's given you leg wraps, long strips of cloth wound around your calves like some kind of medieval compression therapy. They keep the drafts out and also give your legs that stylish trussed ham appearance. And don't forget the feet, socks. You wish. More like wool foot tubes, one pair made from unraveled yarn, another lined with straw, and finally your boots, if you still have them. They're cracked at the seams and tied with string, but they hold everything in place and on a good day prevent total frostbite. Historians sometimes argue whether layering was an intentional method or just a result of having no single garment warm enough. You know, it's both. You dress like a scarecrow and hope the collective weight of rags forms a barrier against the chill. Every morning you shuffle to the fire pit, fabric dragging, arms bundled against your chest. Moving is awkward. Bending down is a comedy routine, but you're warmer, barely. And you're not alone. Everyone else looks just as absurd, thick with clothes, thin with patience. It's not fashion. It's survival, and you've mastered it. You don't have a wardrobe. You have a pile, a glorious, scratchy, mismatched pile of fabric scraps, repurposed garments, and glorified sacks. Welcome to medieval winter fashion, where the goal isn't style, it's survival. Scarves aren't really a thing. What you have instead is a collection of old linen strips. You wrap them around your neck until your head practically fuses with your shoulders. Bonus points if one end can be pulled up over your nose like a snood or tied under your chin when the wind gets spiteful. For headwear, you've got options. There's the coif, a close-fitting cap that looks like you've borrowed it from a slightly judgmental nun. There's the felted wool hood, heavy and damp at the seams, which makes you feel vaguely like a sad forest gnome. And if you're truly desperate, you shove a pile of rags under your main hat, like you're smuggling turnips. Outerwear. If you have a cloak, you're lucky. If not, you just keep piling until one of your shirts becomes your coat. You tie it shut with whatever you can find. Twine, leftover belt loops, bits of rope from the chicken pen. Function over form, always. Some neighbors get creative. One old man wraps his arms in strips of leather and ties them with horsehair. A nearby widow wears 2 skirts and ties reeds between them for insulation. Is it effective? Nobody knows, but we all nod approvingly anyway. It's effort, and that counts. Even the children get into it. They parade around looking like animated bundles of rags, faces barely peeking through wool and fur. They fall down often, mostly because they can't bend their knees anymore, but they're warmish, and they laugh when they tumble. Historians love to reconstruct medieval garments based on surviving fragments, but out here, every outfit is unique. Every layer tells a story, and none of it matches. You might not look good, but you feel slightly less cold, and that, this season, is the ultimate win. Wool is life. You itch, you scratch, you complain, but you never take it off. Not unless you're washing it, which almost never happens in winter, because wet wool smells like a soggy sheep and takes a week to dry, so you just embrace the aroma. And the static, the wool tunic is your constant companion. You inherited it, probably. It's been patched at least 4 times. Shoulder, hem, armpit, and that weird spot on the back no one admits to damaging. It doesn't really fit, but it's the warmest thing you own, and you'd rather lose your shoes than your tunic blankets. Also, wool. They're stiff, heavy, and capable of standing up on their own if you leave them in the corner too long. But when night falls and the wind howls, you pull 2, 3, even 4 wool layers over you. They don't drape, they weigh, like a sleepy sheep has decided to lie down on your chest. There's a superstition in the village. Some say if your wool has too much lanolin left in it, it attracts lice. Others claim it repels them. Historians still argue the truth. You mostly just shrug and scratch your neck. The wool's warm, that's all that matters. Spinning and weaving happen in winter, of course. That's when the work slows outside and you need something to do by firelight. Your aunt's at the spindle constantly, muttering about tension and threads, the fibers twisting between her fingers like smoke. You help card the fleece, pulling out bits of straw, picking burrs from the wool like you're grooming a very patient sheep. You don't mind. The work is warm and it smells like summer. Wool isn't glamorous, but it's sacred. It's protection, it's inheritance, it's tradition. And right now, as the wind groans at the door again, it's the difference between another night's sleep and a very cold morning you might not wake up from. By now, you've accepted that nothing you wear was ever made for you. It was made for someone else, somewhere else, years ago. But it found its way to you through trades, deaths, births, marriages, and one suspiciously generous monk. Every garment tells a story, usually involving holes. You spend long winter evenings mending clothes by the fire, squinting at frayed seams while the candle sputters. The thread is never the right color, the needle is always bent, the fabric is tired. But your hands know the rhythm. Pinch, pull, knot. The stitches are uneven, but they hold. You patch elbows with scraps from torn sleeves, rehem pants with leftover string, and try to forget the time your child cut holes in their tunic to make eye windows for fun. Some clothes go through multiple owners. A shirt that belonged to your older brother is now your daughter's sleeping tunic, that blanket your great-aunt wove. It's a cloak by day, mattress by night. There's no ceremony when something changes purpose, it just does. When a sock dies, it becomes a glove. When a cloak tears beyond repair, it becomes stuffing. When the stuffing molds, it becomes chicken coop lining. The circle of cloth, complete. There's even a sort of quiet pride in your repair work. Some stitches are neat enough to admire. Others are lumpy and crooked, but functional. You don't need fashion, you need fabric that doesn't let wind through. Anything else is luxury. Historians often debate how much peasants actually owned, garment-wise. Some say 2 outfits max, others argue seasonal variations. You've got enough to stay warm, just barely, and that feels rich. You know every item in your possession. You've slept in them, worked in them, bled in them, and loved in them. They're more than clothes, they're your armor. And you'll keep patching them until they're more stitched than fabric. When it's cold enough that your breath turns to fog inside your own house, you learn one thing very quickly. People are warmer than blankets. That's why you sleep all together, in one bed, one mat, one big, tangled pile of limbs and snores. It's not optional. It's survival. The bed is more of a platform, honestly. A wooden frame with a woven rope base, sagging slightly in the middle, topped with a lumpy mattress made of straw, rags, and whatever didn't crawl away when you fluffed it last week. The good news? You don't notice the lumps when you're crammed in like firewood. Everyone has their spot. The adults on the edges, the children in the middle. The baby gets the warmest position, tucked deep between 2 bodies like a dumpling. The dog sometimes sneaks in, usually near someone's feet. No one invites him. He just knows where the heat is. At night, you all shuffle into place, pulling the heavy wool blankets over yourselves like a tarp over vegetables at market. Within minutes, the room is filled with soft wheezing, creaking boards, and the occasional fart no one dares claim. Privacy doesn't exist, but warmth does. And right now that matters more. There's a rhythm to shared sleep. If one person turns, 3 others adjust. If someone coughs, everyone holds their breath for a second. If a child wets the bed, there's a groan, a shuffle, and then acceptance. You sleep in shifts sometimes, half waking, half dreaming, conserving body heat like it's treasure. Historians point to records of communal sleeping among medieval households, and some accounts even describe inns where strangers slept shoulder to shoulder. You understand why. Body heat is free. And in a world where nothing else is, that's priceless. You may not have space, but you have warmth. You have each other, and tonight, that's enough. It's not just a free-for-all when bedtime comes. The sleeping pile may look chaotic, but there's an unspoken structure to it, one based on age, status, and pure strategy. Where you sleep depends not on how tired you are, but on who needs warmth most, and who you're trying to avoid elbowing in the face. The oldest in the family, usually grandparents or a visiting elder, get the edge spots near the wall. Not because it's coziest, but because it's quiet, stable, and slightly warmer than sleeping by the door. You put children in the center, not just for protection, but because they lose body heat faster. Plus, they wriggle less when swaddled in wool and wedged between siblings. Parents often take flank positions like guard dogs in human form, one eye half open, always listening. You're the last to fall asleep and the first to rise. If anyone gets cold, you're the blanket. If someone needs to be nudged awake because they've started sleep mumbling about bees again, that's your job too. Then there's the problem of snorers. You strategically place them at the far end, by the door, where their rattling won't disturb the fragile rest of everyone else. Usually. Historians still puzzle over how much personal space medieval people expected. The answer, as you now know, is not much. You share everything: bed, breath, and sometimes dreams. In the deepest part of winter, the rules soften. Even grumpy Uncle Wolf gets to squeeze in if the frost is thick enough. Your place in the bed says a lot. It's warmth, yes, but also status, trust, even affection. You reach out in the dark, touch a familiar shoulder or arm, and you know you belong here. This is your place in the pile, a place earned with patience, chores, and the occasional midnight sneeze. There's a strange kind of intimacy in medieval winter sleep. You're never truly alone, and at night that becomes literal. Human warmth is the best insulator you have, and so you sleep pressed up against family, friends, sometimes even livestock. It's not affection, not entirely. It's insulation. You learn where the warmest spots are: the belly, the back, the crook of a knee. You find yourself curving instinctively toward another body in the dark, not because you need to cuddle, but because your nose is turning numb and their spine radiates precious heat. When it's especially cold, there's no hesitation. You flatten together like books on a shelf, arms tucked in, heads covered, legs intertwined in a tangle no one bothers to sort. You wake up with your little brother's foot in your armpit and someone else's braid tickling your cheek, and no one even mentions it. That's just part of it. Sleeping together means shared space, shared sweat, and shared survival. There's even a kind of language to it. A shift in someone's weight might signal they're cold, so you edge closer. A sigh against your shoulder could mean they've finally drifted off. If someone suddenly jolts upright because the dog sneezed again, you all wait silently, breath held, then slowly relax back into place like a fabric sculpture returning to form. Historians refer to this as communal warmth or group slumber, but you don't think of it as anything that formal. It's just the way things are. The hearth may go cold in the night, but the people don't. You become each other's fire. There's a kind of trust in it too, letting someone sleep beside you skin to skin beneath thick wool, knowing that your shared heat may be the difference between a restless night and not waking at all. It's quiet, automatic, and strangely comforting, even if someone does drool a little. Of course, not everything about group sleeping is comforting. Some of it is tolerable at best. You may be warm, yes, but you are also trapped in a stinky, twitchy, snoring heap of humanity, and no blanket can protect you from that. The noise is constant. Someone's always shifting. Someone else is muttering in their sleep. There's the deep, nasal rattle of a grandfather with sinus issues, the tiny whimper snores of a baby, and the occasional nighttime whisper that trails off into nonsense. The dog dreams too, its feet twitching as it yips into someone's thigh, and every so often someone farts. No one acknowledges it. There's nothing to be gained from making eye contact at that point. Then there's the smell, a unique blend of unwashed wool, stale breath, damp straw, and whatever stew got spilled on someone's tunic 3 days ago. You try to breathe shallowly. You pretend it's earthy, but really it's just ripe. Squirming is its own sport. Someone's always too hot or too cold. You turn and your elbow jabs someone's ribs. They roll and you nearly fall off the bed. The straw mattress shifts and crunches. At least once a night, someone gets up to pee and trips over at least 2 bodies trying to get to the door. If you're lucky, they don't land on you. Historians often romanticize peasant family closeness, but you know the truth. It's a closeness born of necessity, not choice. You're jammed into that bed because there's nowhere else to go. And if you all survive until morning, that's the only success that matters. You love your family, truly. But when spring finally comes and people start sleeping apart again, even just a little, you won't complain. You'll miss the warmth maybe, but not the snoring. Definitely not the snoring. Starting a fire in a medieval peasant's home isn't as simple as striking a match, because, surprise, matches haven't been invented yet. No, when you want warmth, you've got to earn it the hard way. And that starts with your hands, your breath, and a healthy dose of desperation. You begin the day crouched in front of the hearth, poking at last night's ash like it owes you something. Maybe a few embers survived. If so, you're lucky. You pile dry straw, a feathered twist of linen thread, and the tiniest twigs you can find around the still warm center. Then comes the blowing, gentle at first. Too hard and you'll scatter the ashes. Too soft and nothing happens. It's like trying to convince a sleepy cat to stand up. It'll do it only when it feels like it. But sometimes the embers are dead, long gone, and that's when the real work begins. Out comes the flint and steel. You strike them together again and again, hoping for that one glorious spark that lands where you want it. Your hands are cold, your fingers stiff, and the steel keeps slipping. Every now and then the spark does catch, but it fizzles out on damp straw because your daughter left the fire-starting bundle too close to the wall last night. Again, you try drying the straw near your armpit for a few minutes. Yes, it smells weird. No, it doesn't help much, but it's the kind of thing you do now. Welcome to medieval problem solving. Historians still debate whether all peasants owned proper flint and steel tools, or whether these were luxury items shared between households. In your case, they're borrowed from a cousin's cousin who charges payment in eggs or mending work. You keep them wrapped in cloth, stashed in a box under the bed, because losing them would mean no fire for days. Sometimes you give up and go beg a coal from a neighbor. You shuffle over through the frost, a clay pot clutched in your hands, and ask politely while trying not to look like a complete failure. If they're kind, or just cold too, they'll give you a burning lump wrapped in moss or dung. You hurry back like it's a sacred torch, shielding it from wind, like your life depends on it, because honestly, it kind of does. When the fire finally catches, it's a moment of silent celebration. The flickering glow feels like a small miracle. You warm your fingers, then your face, then the bottom of your tunic. The kids inch closer, the dog sighs. The house begins to smell like smoke and comfort. It took half the morning, but the fire is yours, at least until nightfall. Once you get the fire going, the next question is, what do you burn to keep it alive? You'd love to say wood, but that's a luxury in your world. Wood is currency. It heats, it builds, it cooks, it lights, and it gets you in serious trouble if you collect it from the wrong tree. Forests belong to the Lord, not to you, and cutting down a live tree without permission can cost more than a winter's worth of wages, or your hands, depending on who's in charge this year. So you gather deadfall. Twigs, bark, broken branches. If it snaps cleanly and doesn't have moss, you grab it. If it's already damp, you still grab it. You'll dry it later. Probably, eventually. Then there's dung. Yes, dung. You didn't think you'd become a connoisseur of animal droppings, but here we are. Cow dung is best. It dries into tidy little bricks and burns slow and smoky. Horse dung burns hot but fast. Pig dung. Let's just say it's Plan C. You collect the manure, shape it, stack it in the sun when the sun bothers showing up, and let it harden. When it's dry enough, it becomes part of the firewood pile, kind of. You don't stack it with the nice fuel, obviously. That would be rude. If things get truly desperate, you burn bones. Not the good soup-making ones, the brittle leftovers, bones from long-gone meals saved for months in a sack by the hearth. They pop and hiss when they burn, like they're arguing with you for not giving them a better fate, but they produce just enough heat to warm your hands. And right now, that's worth the noise. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants relied more on dung or brushwood, especially in northern climates. You think, why not both? Anything that burns, burns, including bits of old thatch, dried weeds, and even broken kitchen tools if you're feeling especially cold and creatively reckless. And then there are days when you scavenge. The village midden has scraps of burnable mystery, someone's rotted basket. An old shoe, A forgotten cloth rag soaked in something you don't ask. If it ignites, it's yours. You dream of a real log, thick, dry, crackling. But in the meantime, your fire smells faintly of barn and ash. And when it glows orange in the gloom, it doesn't matter what's feeding it. It's still fire, it's still heat. And it's still yours. You've gone through all the trouble of starting the fire. You've fed it twigs, dried dung, and that weird bone from last month's stew. It's finally crackling, giving off just enough heat to stop your toes from turning to stone. Now comes the real challenge, keeping it alive until morning. The fire is lazy. You feed it and it purrs, but the moment you look away too long, poof, gone. Just a bed of sulky gray ash and the faint smell of defeat. So you make a plan. Every night before bed, you prepare it like you're tucking in a very temperamental baby dragon. First, you bank it. That means pushing the embers into a tight pile, covering them gently with ash to smother the oxygen and slow the burn. You place 1, maybe 2 thicker pieces of fuel on top, if you have them. Not too much, or it'll flare up and burn out. Too little, and it'll vanish in an hour. It's a gamble every time. Then comes the guarding. If someone wakes in the night, usually you, because someone's kicked the blanket off again, you check the hearth. Is it still glowing? Is there a wisp of smoke? If not, it's panic time. You shuffle around, half asleep, blowing into the ashes like you're trying to convince an old friend not to die on you. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Some families assign fire duty, rotating the task of stoking it every few hours. Others rely on their instincts and sheer insomnia. You've developed a nose for it, literally. If the smoke smell fades too much, you know something's wrong. You get up, wrap yourself in your itchiest cloak, and prod the hearth like a grumpy mole. Historians still explore how critical firekeeping was in peasant households. In your experience, it's everything. No fire means no cooking, no warmth, no light. It's not just an inconvenience, it's a setback. You lose the fire, and you lose a day to getting it back. So you get creative. You wrap hot stones in cloth and bury them in straw to hold heat. You keep embers in small clay pots, tucked near the hearth, just in case. You even whisper good wishes to the coals sometimes, as if they might appreciate the encouragement. Who knows? Maybe they do. When the fire survives the night, you feel like you've won a private little war. The room is still cold, yes, but not frozen. There's a pulse of warmth, a chance to boil water without begging your neighbor. A chance to face another day, and in the heart of winter, even a few glowing coals can feel like hope. You can't just throw everything into the fire. Well, you could, but you'd run out of everything useful by midwinter, so you've learned to prioritize, to weigh every scrap of fuel like it's part of a moral dilemma. What stays? What burns? The rules are simple, but brutal. First, anything broken beyond repair goes in. The leg of a stool that finally cracked under your cousin's dramatic sitting style. Firewood. The bent wooden spoon that splinters every time you stir porridge. It burns with a satisfying little pop. Splinters and kindling. 2 problems, 1 solution. Next comes anything organic but questionably useful. Dried weeds, corn husks, moldy straw, old thatch, and the occasional rat's nest you bravely swept from the corner. They go up fast, make a lot of smoke, and leave very little heat. But when you're desperate, they're golden. You're careful with paper, if you even have any. A crumpled scrap from the tax collector's discarded notice, straight into the flames. You smile a little when you burn that one. Then come the harder decisions. A bit of old rope. It might still be useful for tying up the chicken coop. But it also catches flame nicely. An empty grain sack. You could patch something with it, or light it and warm your feet for a few minutes. These are the moments where you become an accidental philosopher, sitting in your smoky room, weighing warmth against future usefulness. Historians often overlook this part of daily life, this constant triage of material, but you live it every day. You've even hidden an old wooden ladle under the bed, saving it for an especially brutal frost. You call it your emergency stick. You haven't told anyone about it. Even bones are prioritized. You boil them for soup first, then dry them. Then burn them, in that order. Efficiency isn't just smart, it's survival. And then there are the regrets. That time you burned the cracked lid of the cooking pot, only to realize later it made a perfect cover for the grain barrel. Or when you sacrificed half a broom for kindling and spent 2 weeks sweeping with a bundle of sticks tied to a chair leg. But tonight, as the wind howls and the fire flickers, you drop an old comb into the flames. It flares up beautifully. You warm your hands. You sigh. Worth it. You thought the cold would kill them. You really did. But here they are, alive, thriving, and determined. Fleas. You wrap yourself in fur for warmth, only to find the little squatters already holding a conference in there. The fleas are bold. They don't wait until you're asleep. They leap, they nibble, they crawl right up your sleeve and settle in for the season. Your armpits are a flea spa, your thighs. A flea festival. The children scratch constantly, sometimes absent-mindedly, sometimes with wild, panicked fury. Your fur cloak, once a source of great pride, gifted from a cousin, patched with fox, maybe rabbit, is now a 5-star flea hotel. You shake it out daily, trying to dislodge the worst of them. Some jump away, most don't. They're in deep now. You try tricks, hanging the cloak outside in the frost, dusting it with ashes, even boiling a pot of herbs and pretending it's flea repellent. It isn't. It just makes your cloak smell like soup. You hold it over the smoke sometimes, turning it like a roasted duck, hoping the fumes will make the fleas second-guess their life choices. It doesn't. They just burrow deeper. Historians suggest that flea infestations were so common in medieval homes that people simply accepted them. You wouldn't say you've accepted them. You've just made peace with your itchy reality. When your bed is full of fleas, and your clothes are full of fleas, and even the family dog scratches in his sleep, you stop asking why and start asking, how bad is it today? Sometimes you catch one mid-hop, a tiny brown speck with legs like springs. You crush it between your fingernails and feel victorious. 1 down, 9 million to go. At night, you lay down fully clothed to avoid giving them new landing zones. You wrap your feet in linen, then in wool, and pray the fleas get bored before reaching your knees. They don't, but you try anyway. The worst part: warmth draws them out. The cozier you get, the more active they become. It's a cruel trade-off. Comfort invites company. So you scratch, you swat, you groan. And then you sleep, because what else can you do? If fleas are the guests in your home, lice are the ones who move in, build a patio, and ask where the laundry room is. You don't remember a time before lice. You probably had them before you had teeth. Your children have them. Your spouse has them. Even the neighbor who brags about being cleaner than a friar scratches his scalp like he's applauding himself all day. Lice live in your hair, your eyebrows, your clothes. Especially your clothes. The seams of your tunic are like luxury apartments for them, warm, dark, and lined with lint. You've picked through those seams with a knife, found whole colonies. You stared in silence, then set the tunic near the fire for an hour like a burnt offering. You try to stay clean, within reason. A cold stream wash when it's not freezing. A vinegar rinse when you have some to spare. A brisk scratch session every morning while muttering curses. You've also tried the ash rub, coating your scalp in fireplace soot to suffocate the lice. Did it work? Maybe. But now you just look vaguely haunted, like you lost a duel with a chimney. Historians debate whether medieval folk saw lice as shameful or just expected. From your perspective, they're part of the family now. You joke about them, you name them. Sir Itchington has lived on your shoulder seam for 2 weeks and seems very invested in your life choices. You've learned tricks though. Hang clothes in sunlight, lice hate light, bake garments near the fire. Rotate tunics every few days, not for fashion, but to break the louse cycle. The kids even have a competition. Who can find the biggest one? It's horrifying. It's adorable. It's winter. Lice don't kill you. Not directly, but they wear you down. Sleep becomes lighter. Rest is interrupted by the itch. And dignity? Well, that left weeks ago, probably riding a louse like a tiny pony. But you endure. You always do, with one hand scratching and the other keeping the fire going. You try to sleep. You really do. You've earned it. Hauling water, patching the roof, surviving another day without freezing your thumbs off. But the second you start drifting, the scratching begins. Not loud, just persistent. A slow, rhythmic rustling beneath the blankets. Someone's at it again. Might be your daughter. Might be you. Hard to say in the dark. What's certain is that no one is immune, and scratching has become the household's unofficial winter soundtrack. It joins the creak of the straw mattress, the occasional cough, and the distant snore that sounds vaguely like someone trying to clear a bowl of porridge through their nose. You try to ignore it. You shift. You scratch your shin with your other heel. You rub your elbow on the wool blanket's rough edge. None of it helps. Because once one itch is scratched, 3 more appear. It's like medieval whack-a-mole with your own nervous system. Sleep comes in fragments now. You drift off, wake up scratching, drift again, feel something crawl behind your knee. You swipe at it, mutter a prayer, and roll over, only to start the process again. The fire's gone low. Your fingers are cold. Your scalp feels like it's been rented out to a colony of dance-happy bugs. Historians sometimes wonder how sleep quality was affected by living conditions. You'd love to weigh in, poorly. That's the answer. It's not just the cold or the noise or the hard-packed dirt beneath your bed. It's the constant low-level war between your skin and the parasites that call it home. Sometimes you dream of itching. You dream you're in a field of thistles, or that a goose is walking across your chest in slow motion. You wake, and nothing's there, except that familiar burning along your arms and back. In the rare moment when everyone else is asleep, the cottage stills. You hear the wind against the walls. You feel someone breathing next to you. You try to relax. And then, scratch. So much for that. You've tried them all. Every remedy passed down from your grandmother's cousin's goat-herding wife. Every questionable paste, powder, oil, and ritual. If desperation were a cure for lice and fleas, you'd be cured 10 times over. First, there's ash. Plain fireplace ash. Rubbed into your scalp until you look like you were struck by lightning and then left out in the rain. Does it kill bugs? No one knows. But it makes you smell like burnt bread, which is a conversation starter at least. Then there's vinegar. If you can spare a drop, usually not since it's needed for cooking, you pour it over your scalp and pretend it's helping. All it does is make your eyes water and give you the faint odor of expired wine. Still, you keep doing it. Because sometimes belief is warmer than truth. You've also tried the herb sack. A pouch of dried lavender, rosemary, and crushed mint stuffed into your tunic collar, supposed to repel insects. Mostly, it just makes you sneeze. And in winter, sneezing is dangerous. It's a direct invitation for your neighbor to declare you unwell and back away like you've turned into a medieval ghost. Then comes the combing, the daily ritual of scraping a dull, hand-carved comb through your tangled hair while muttering curses under your breath. The lice are clever. They dive, dodge, and cling. You get a few, you squish them with grim satisfaction. But the rest? They wait until you're asleep and return like tiny, itchy bandits. Historians write about ointments made from animal fat mixed with sulfur or ash. You tried that once. Smelled like someone lit a torch under a spoiled ham. Even the dog wouldn't come near you. And of course, there's the ritualistic route, spitting 3 times over your shoulder, whispering charms under a full moon. Asking a local widow to bless your hair. No lice ever fled, but you did feel mildly interesting for an hour. Still, you try them all again, because doing something feels better than doing nothing. Even when nothing works, you don't drink ale because you want to party. You drink ale because it's safer than the water, and because it's one of the few things in your life that arrives warm, bitter, and bubbling with the faint promise of comfort. You start your morning with it. Not much, just a cup. Weak ale, barely alcoholic, made from leftover grains boiled and steeped like tea. It doesn't make you tipsy. It makes you hydrated, which, in winter, is harder than it sounds. The well water is frozen. The stream has turned into a silent snake of ice, and when you can get water, it tastes like old moss and roof runoff. But ale, that's your everyday drink. Your spouse brews it in a corner barrel with scalded grains, a pinch of herbs, and whatever yeast survived the last batch. The fire keeps it just warm enough to ferment slowly. The children drink it. The elders sip it. It's barely stronger than broth, but it fills the belly and takes the edge off the cold. Historians note how central ale was to medieval life, especially for peasants. You live that reality. It's food, drink, medicine, and mood lifter all in one. A warm mug in your hands means the fire's still going and the grains haven't run out. It means your household is still managing, barely. You hold the cup close, fingers wrapped around it like a prayer. You take a sip. It tastes faintly sour, maybe a bit burnt. But it's warm, it's familiar, and for just a moment you stop itching. You stop coughing. You let yourself believe this day might not be the worst one yet. You put the cup down. The children are already reaching for theirs, and the long, cold morning begins again. You don't have a tap. You don't have a cellar full of neatly labeled bottles. What you have is a wooden barrel in the corner of your home, a battered ladle, and the quiet determination to keep your family drinking safely, because winter is not kind to water. It freezes, it stinks, it harbors who knows what from upstream, and frankly, no one's eager to test its flavor with an already weak stomach. So instead, you brew. Everyone brews. Your brewing setup is humble, a large pot for boiling grain mash, usually barley or oats, a cloth strainer that was once a shirt, a wooden paddle for stirring, and a clay jug to carry the finished brew to the table. If you're fancy, or your cousin's been generous, you might even toss in a handful of herbs for flavor, mint maybe, wild thyme if the goat hasn't eaten all of it. The brewing process is slow but soothing. You heat the water with care, add the grains, and stir in wide, sleepy circles. The smell rises, malty, earthy, warm. It's one of the few comforting scents in the house that doesn't involve firewood or stewed onions. Once boiled, you cool it down carefully, then add your saved yeast from the last batch, if you remembered to save it. Sometimes it's a scrap of bread crust soaked in liquid, passed down like a tiny, sacred sponge. You leave it covered near the hearth, bundled in cloth like a sickly pet. It ferments slowly over a few days, bubbling quietly when the house is still. Children sneak sniffs. You swat them away. If they spill it, you'll cry, and not just from the smell. Historians often mention that medieval ale was small or weak, and that's true. It's low in alcohol, barely enough to make your ears warm. But you're not drinking it to get tipsy. You're drinking it to survive. And in winter, your little barrel of murky brown ale is as prized as firewood. Because it means your household still has some warmth to give. After a day of hauling wood, patching holes, chasing lice, and picking bits of frozen turnip out of your teeth, you don't dream of riches or escape. You dream of one thing: warm ale. It's not fancy. It's not poured into a silver goblet. It's ladled from a wooden bucket into a ceramic mug with a chip in the rim, and it's heated just enough to feel like a hug in liquid form. No honey, no spice, just warmth, grain, and the gentle whisper of fermentation. You cradle the cup like it might melt in your hands. Everyone else is doing the same. The fire pops lazily, and the cottage glows with a sort of sleepy flicker. You take a sip. It's sour, maybe a little smoky, and it tastes like everything you've worked for today. Some say warmed ale helps you sleep. You believe them. Not because of the alcohol, it's barely stronger than bathwater, but because it soothes you from the inside. It wraps around your ribs, quiets the scratch in your throat, and smooths the edges off your frayed nerves. The children are quieter now. One is nodding off mid-slurp, the cup tilted dangerously in their lap. You take it gently and finish it for them. Waste not. Historians note that ale was often served at every meal in medieval homes, but few talk about how it became a kind of ritual. For you, it's not just a drink. It's the punctuation at the end of a long, cold sentence. It's the moment you stop moving, stop scratching, stop calculating how much wood you have left. It's the one time of day where warmth is a given, not a gamble. You finish your cup, you sigh. You pull your cloak tighter, and for the first time all day, you feel something close to peace. You wouldn't call it drunk. That word feels too big, too boisterous for the quiet, heavy-lidded fog that ale brings. It's not a celebration. It's a soft landing. A fuzziness that blurs the edges of your aches and turns worry into background noise. The last sip goes down, lukewarm. The mug is empty. You lick a grainy drop off your thumb and let the haziness settle in your chest. It's not strong enough to tip you over, just enough to lean you gently toward your straw mattress and the slow surrender of sleep. You blink slower. Your hands stop twitching, the fire dims, and the familiar noises of your family curling into place surround you. Blankets rustling, someone scratching, of course, the dog letting out a long, theatrical sigh. You sink into it all like bread into broth. The ale does its best work now, not during chores or meal times, but right here, at the edge of sleep. Your thoughts drift less sharply. The cold feels a little farther away. You stop calculating whether you have enough firewood to make it through the week. Instead, you think of dumb things, how your big toe is warmer than your pinky toe, how the dog's feet smell like barley, how your neighbor once claimed ale could cure toothaches if you gargled long enough. You almost believe it. Historians still discuss the role alcohol played in medieval peasant life. Was it a dietary staple, a coping mechanism, a health tool? You shrug. Tonight it's a lullaby. No choir, no harp. Just this gentle blur at the back of your eyes and the way your head finally stops buzzing like a kicked beehive. You know you'll wake at some point, maybe to a cough, maybe to a shiver, maybe to someone stepping on your ankle during a midnight scramble to the privy. But for now, you rest. The ale, thin and sour as it was, worked. You feel loose, floaty, like someone untied your muscles. You itch less, you think less, and you sleep. It starts with the chickens. They sneak in first, small, feathered, stubborn. You swear you barred the door, but come morning, there's a hen perched smugly on the firewood pile, like she's paying rent in eggs. She isn't. Then it's the piglets. They're too young to handle the cold, and frankly, you need them alive come spring. So into the cottage they go, bundled in straw, squealing softly, noses rooting around the corners of the room, looking for dropped crusts. You don't complain, not much. Their body heat is worth the mess. The goat follows. She hates the snow and bleats pitifully until someone gives in. Now she shares your side of the hearth, glaring whenever you try to scoot her over. Her breath smells like turnips. Her hooves clack on the floorboards like an annoyed landlord. Eventually, even the old cow gets invited in. Just for a night, you promise. Just until the frost breaks. She stares at you with big, judgmental eyes and fills the entire space with warmth and a particular odor you learn to ignore. Sort of. Historians love to theorize about medieval home layouts, where the animals slept, how they were separated. You'd laugh if your throat wasn't full of hay dust. There's no animal section in your house. There's just room and heat. And necessity. The animals are loud. They snore. They grunt, they fought, but they're warm. Their bodies fill the air with a slow, moist heat that wraps around your ankles like a living blanket. And in the dead of winter, that counts for more than silence or space or dignity. Your children curl up near the goat. The dog wedges himself under the piglet. The cat, aloof as ever, lounges in the rafters pretending she lives in a castle. And you. You lie down next to a cow's flank, listen to her steady breathing, and think, this is ridiculous. This is perfect. This is how you make it through another night. It's one thing to let animals into the house. It's another to live with them full time. Side by side. You're not just sheltering them from the cold anymore. They're your roommates. No, roommates implies they pay rent. These creatures pay in body heat, yes, but also in manure and stubbornness. Take the pig. He has opinions. He grunts when the fire dies down. He paces near the door when someone blocks his corner, and he's taken a liking to your sleeping mat. You tried moving him once, just once. He squealed like you'd insulted his ancestors, and then plopped down with the full weight of a sack of wet flour. You lost that argument. The goat is bossy. She nibbles on the hems of your tunics, and has a fondness for climbing over sleeping children to reach the grain sack. Her hooves have left permanent divots in the floor. You tried putting her outside once. She screamed until someone let her back in. At this point, she's basically your third child. The chickens are less trouble, mostly because they roost in the rafters and drop gifts from above. You've stopped being surprised by this. Everyone has. You just cover the stew pot when you're not stirring it and keep your mouth shut, literally, when walking under the beams. Historians sometimes speculate whether medieval peasants cohabited with livestock during winter. You smile at the thought of someone needing to speculate. You couldn't afford not to. Livestock are your savings account, your food source, and your heating system. The pig is your bacon-to-be, and the goat is your milk when she feels generous. If they freeze outside, you don't eat in spring. It's that simple. Of course, it's crowded now. Every corner is full. The dog curls between legs. The cow snores so loudly you're certain she's dreaming of thunder. You step over tails, dodge hooves, and once, just once, you woke up nose to nose with the chicken. Still, it's not all bad. The animals bring a kind of rhythm to the house. Their grunts and breaths become part of the background. Their presence means life. Warm, noisy, slightly smelly life. You roll over in the night and feel the pig's side radiating heat. You press your toes against his back, mutter a thanks, and drift off again. You've never been closer to your food, and oddly enough, it works. Of course, there's a downside to all this cozy interspecies bonding: hygiene. And by hygiene, you mean that your home now smells like a damp barn crossed with a goat's armpit. It's not subtle. It hits you the moment you step inside, like a warm slap of hay sweat and animal breath. You try to keep things clean. You really do. You scoop manure into a bucket twice a day and toss it on the compost pile out back. You lay fresh straw, sweep the corners, hang up your cloaks so the goat won't chew them again. But it's a losing battle. The warmth that the animals bring also brings moistness. And moistness, in winter, never dries. It just ferments. The pig has claimed a spot near the hearth that now permanently smells like smoked bacon and regret. The goat has a favorite place beside the door where she leaves little pellet presents with startling regularity. Even the cow, who you only let in during the frostiest nights, leaves behind a lingering perfume that not even the strongest herb bundle can mask. The children, they're nose blind. They think this is just what inside smells like. The baby once crawled directly through a pile of chicken droppings and didn't even flinch. You tried to be mad, but really, who hasn't done that once or twice? Historians often argue about the line between medieval homes and barns. How separated were the spaces, really? You don't see a line. You see a cow in the kitchen and a pig under the table. That's the layout now. You've stopped apologizing for the smell. Everyone's house smells. Everyone's house has creatures living in it. The trick isn't avoiding it, it's managing it. Keeping the straw dry, moving the animals around so one corner doesn't rot through the floor, lighting herbs near the fire to cut the worst of it. Lavender works, so does rosemary, so does pretending not to care. You've even convinced yourself that it's healthy in its own weird way. Exposure builds resistance, right? If that's true, your children are going to live forever. At the end of the day, you measure the cost. A smelly home, yes. Hooves where there shouldn't be hooves, sure. But also warmth. The kind of warmth that keeps toes intact and spirits from sinking too low. And honestly, when the wind is rattling the shutters and you're wrapped in a blanket pressed between a dog and a goat, you don't think about hygiene. You think, this beats freezing. You don't talk about it much. No one does. But the animals aren't just here for heat. They're company. They're comfort. They're a kind of quiet presence that makes the long gray days feel a little less endless. The dog, for instance. He doesn't do much. He sleeps, stretches, snores, and occasionally barks at the wind as if it personally offended him. But he's always there. His tail thumps when you walk by. He leans against your leg like it's the most natural thing in the world. And on nights when you feel a little too small for the cold world outside, that thumping tail reminds you you're not alone. The goat, for all her trouble, listens better than most humans. You've caught yourself talking to her, telling her about the neighbor's leaky roof. Complaining about your cousin's snoring. She blinks, chews, and gives you a sideways glance like she's storing your gossip for later. You suspect she judges you. That's fine. At least she's listening. The pig is comforting in a different way. He's warm, yes, but also round, calm, and entirely unbothered by life. You envy him. He eats. He grunts. He naps. Occasionally, he makes a sound like a sneeze wrapped in a yawn. When you press your back against him at night, you feel steadier, like you're anchoring yourself to something solid and alive. Historians sometimes write about animals as tools, sources of food, labor, income. That's true. But they were also family, not in the sentimental painted portrait over the fireplace kind of way, but in the way that shared breath, shared warmth, and shared hardship turns even a grumpy goat into something more. The children play with the chickens, they talk to the cow, they make up stories about the cat who stares at everyone with royal disdain from atop the woodpile. The animals aren't just here, they're part of the rhythm, the heartbeat, the background hum of your cold season life. When the wind howls outside and the fire's gone low, it's not just the blankets or the body heat that get you through, it's the presence. The snort in the dark, the shuffle of hooves, the sigh of a dog who somehow always finds the warmest spot first. You reach out and rest your hand on the goat's side. She grumbles but doesn't move, and for a moment you feel okay. You might think winter is ruled by frost and firewood, but really, it's ruled by the church. Not just in the big, lofty way of sermons and saints, but in the day-to-day details of how you live, eat, work, and yes, even how warm you're allowed to be. The calendar is carved up into holy days, feast days, saints' days, and fast days, some big, some small, all important. There's Advent and Christmas, of course, but also the Ember Days, the Vigils, and seemingly random Tuesdays where, according to the priest, you mustn't even boil broth until sunset. You try to keep track, but it's like playing a board game where the rules change halfway through and the game pieces are made of beeswax. You keep a tally with marks on a stick by the hearth. It's your attempt at following the liturgical rhythm. You're not always successful. Once you fried onions during a minor feast and got scolded by a traveling friar who claimed the smell interrupted his prayer. You offered him some. He declined, but you caught him sniffing. During certain fast periods, even heat feels like a luxury. The church doesn't say no fires exactly, but it does say no indulgence, and sometimes warmth feels like indulgence. On stricter days, you might let the fire die earlier or avoid the good wood. You cook simpler, colder food, gruel instead of stew, ale instead of spiced wine. It's all meant to bring you closer to God. You mostly feel closer to hypothermia. Historians debate how strictly these rules were enforced for peasants. The answer depends on the priest, the region, and whether anyone was watching. You do your best. Not because you fear damnation, well, maybe a little, but because everyone else is doing it, and you don't want to be the one person who smells like cooked meat on a fast day. You light your candle at the proper hour. You skip breakfast on St. Scholastica's feast. You bow your head even when your knees are stiff from cold. The church governs more than your soul in winter. It governs your schedule, your habits, your warmth. And whether you understand every rule or not, you obey most of them. Because here in this world, heaven is close, and so is the man who keeps a list of who sinned on what feast. You can go without meat. You've done it before. But when they tell you that on certain holy days, you're not supposed to eat warm food either, that's when winter starts to bite a little deeper. The rule isn't universal. It varies depending on the feast, the fast, the local priest, and how pious your neighbor decides to be that week. But when it hits hard. Cold porridge in a cold room while sitting on a cold bench wrapped in a cold cloak. It doesn't exactly scream spiritual awakening. You still light a small fire, because otherwise you'd be dining in the dark, but you don't use it for cooking. Instead, you chew through yesterday's bread, which has the texture of roof tile, and pretend the goose grease from last week hasn't turned. The kids grimace through cold boiled carrots and sip lukewarm ale, which, let's be honest, is no one's dream beverage at sunrise. You sometimes sneak a hot sip of broth before anyone else wakes. Not because you're trying to defy the rules, but because your teeth are chattering so hard you can't think. You justify it in your head. It was only warm for a moment. God probably didn't even notice. And then you feel guilty for thinking that, but not guilty enough to stop. Historians debate whether medieval peasants truly followed the church's food temperature restrictions, or whether those rules were more often bent than obeyed. You suspect the answer is yes. Yes, we follow them. And yes, we bend them, like twigs under too much snow. There's something about warm food that goes beyond comfort. In winter, it feels like a defiance of the cold, a small rebellion. So when the calendar demands you go without it, you don't just lose a meal, you lose morale. Still you try. You slice the bread thinner, you chew slower. You say your prayers with an extra sigh at the end. The fire crackles softly, unused for cooking, but still allowed for light. You huddle near it, staring into the flickering glow, and wish it could bake just one more turnip. But not today. It's one thing to be cold, it's another to be cold and hungry. Fasting during winter feels like a joke without a punchline. You already ration your meals, you already stretch your grain and hope the dried beans last until March. Now add on a dozen fast days, days when you're meant to eat less, sometimes nothing at all, and always with more piety than grumbling. It's character building, that's one word for it. You skip breakfast most fast days, which isn't hard when breakfast is just leftover porridge crusts and maybe a turnip scrap. But by midday, your stomach is staging a protest. It growls like a caged dog. The baby cries more. The older children get snappish. Even the goat seems more judgmental. You tell stories to distract them. Tales of saints who survived on dew and sunlight. Stories of monks who fasted for 40 days and were rewarded with visions. Your son asks if those monks had stew waiting afterward. You don't answer. Lunch, when it comes, is thin. Watered ale, a scrap of cheese, if the church allows it, maybe a piece of rye bread the size of your palm. You chew slowly. You sip slower. You tell yourself this is holy work, self-denial, cleansing. But mostly you're cold and annoyed, and trying to remember why the church decided that denying calories was a sacred act in January. Historians often note that fasting created a spiritual rhythm in medieval life, a shared discipline, a collective devotion. You suppose that's true. You and your neighbors are united in your suffering. You all fantasize about warm cabbage and roasted anything. You all nod politely when the priest says sacrifice brings you closer to heaven. Still, there's a kind of pride in making it through a fast day. At sundown, you finally warm something, usually soup, and savor it like it's a feast. You lick the bowl clean. You sigh. You share a glance with your spouse like, "We did it again," and then you mark the next fast on the stick by the fire. It's in 2 days. Of course it is. You're a good person. Mostly, you try to follow the rules, You attend Mass when you can, bow your head during the blessing, and avoid eating meat on Fridays unless someone offers, and even then you hesitate before accepting. But winter makes saints of no one, and sometimes when the frost creeps into your bones and your belly is echoing louder than the church bell, you cheat. Just a little. Quietly. Take fast days, for example. You don't roast a goose. You're not a monster, but you might leave the soup on the fire a little longer than necessary, just enough for the turnips to soften and steam to rise invitingly. If someone knocks, you blow out the flame and mutter something about feeding the animals. Or maybe the cold food only rule is in effect. You've heard 3 different versions of it from 3 different priests. One says you can warm broth, but not stew. Another says no heat at all. A third once said ale was exempt because it was a gift of the Lord. You liked that one best, so you interpret the rules with a little flexibility. You set the pot close to the fire, not on it, heavens no, and let ambient warmth do the job. You stir it slowly, humming a hymn under your breath for good measure. Technically, you're not breaking any rules. Technically, sometimes you trade favors with neighbors, a candle for a lump of butter, an old prayer book for a smoked eel. Things move quietly, tucked in baskets beneath laundry or passed by hand in a whoops I dropped this maneuver behind the church. It's a system. Not blessed exactly, but functional. Historians debate how much peasants understood the church's rules. You'd say just enough to know when to bend them. Not out of rebellion, but out of necessity. Out of the very human need to stay alive and slightly less miserable. You still pray. You still listen. But when it's freezing and your child is coughing and you haven't tasted warmth in 3 days, you do what you have to. And then you say sorry later. You've never heard the word chilblains. Not officially, but you know chilblains. You live them. They're the angry, red, stinging things on your toes and fingers that make every step feel like walking on hornets, and every grip feel like your skin is rebelling. It starts with a tingling, just a little burn when your hands go from frozen to slightly less frozen. You rub them near the fire and wince. Then the skin puffs up, red, angry, cracked in places. The itch is maddening. And the pain? It's like someone stuffed needles inside your fingertips and then told you to keep scrubbing turnips. The worst part is how long it lingers. Days, weeks, sometimes through the whole season. You wrap your hands in cloth, you rub goose grease into your knuckles and mutter that old charm your grandmother taught you. Cold in, warm out, let the fire chase the doubt. Doesn't help, but it rhymes. Feet are worse. The toes swell, split, and feel like they're glowing with rage. You try to keep your socks dry, but that's like asking the sky to hold off on rain because your boots are tired. Once, you stepped on a bit of cold slate near the stream and screamed so loud the chickens bolted. Historians say chilblains come from repeated exposure to cold and damp without freezing. You say yes. Exactly, that's your whole life. Everyone in the village has them. The old men groan about their knees, the women massage their hands with sheep tallow, and the children are just too distracted to notice the pain until they stop moving. Then the tears come. You'd love to rest, to let the swelling go down. But life doesn't pause for chilblains. There's kindling to chop, animals to feed. Bread to knead with fists that feel like sacks of gravel. You try to hold your mug without wincing, and most days you fail, but you do it anyway. Because there's no other choice. You adapt. You swear more quietly. You walk slower. You sleep with your hands curled under your armpits like a bird hiding its eggs, and you count the days until spring. You've gotten used to being cold. You wear it like a second skin now. But there's a moment when cold stops being just uncomfortable and starts becoming something else. Something that makes your body feel like it's made of stone and glass at the same time. That's frostbite. It starts in the extremities, fingers, toes, your nose, sometimes even your ears if you forget to pull your hood tight. At first, it's just numbness. Not the dull, familiar numbness of a drafty room, but something quieter, deeper. You poke your fingers together and don't feel much. You wiggle your toes and wonder if they're even moving. Then there's the color. Your skin goes pale, almost bluish. Later, it turns red and swollen, like a turnip that's been left too long near the fire. You press it, curious, and it doesn't bounce back. You press again. Still nothing. You start to worry. Your spouse notices next. They grab your hand and hiss through their teeth. Your fingers feel like stones, they say. You nod. You already knew. You try to warm them slowly. That's the trick, or so you've heard. If you hold them too close to the fire, the pain is unbearable. It comes fast, a deep, gnawing ache that makes you want to scream and laugh at the same time. One winter, you warmed your toes too quickly and they turned purple. They didn't feel normal again until April. Historians still argue about how well medieval peasants understood frostbite. Some say they thought it was just bad blood. Others claim village healers knew more than they let on. You don't know what to call it, but you know it. You recognize it when the older man down the lane loses 2 fingers after falling asleep outside. You see it in your child's pink ears, rubbing them gently with a cloth to coax the color back. You know the difference between cold and okay and cold and dangerous. That knowledge lives in your gut now. It whispers when your skin starts to go hard, when a toe doesn't bend, when a finger feels like it belongs to someone else. And once you know it's coming, all you can do is pray the fire holds out long enough to make it stop. There's no doctor in the village. Not really. There's the herb woman, 2 cottages down, who smells like onions and mutters while she works. There's the blacksmith's wife who once bandaged a horse's leg so well that people started bringing her their sick children. And there's your own instincts, shaped by desperation and half-remembered stories. So when your fingers go white and your toes won't flex, you try everything. First, there's the fire, but you've learned not to trust it fully. You hover your hands above the flame, moving them in slow circles. Too close and the skin blisters. Too far and nothing changes. It's a cruel balancing act, like toasting bread with your eyes closed. Then come the poultices. Warm mashed onion and lard spread onto a cloth, wrapped around your fingers until you smell like dinner gone wrong. The herb woman swears by it. You try not to gag. She says it draws out the cold spirits. You nod. You don't care what it draws out, as long as it helps. There's also urine. Yes, that one. People say soaking your feet in warm, fresh urine helps bring back circulation. You wrinkle your nose and try not to think about it as you lower your feet into a steaming bowl of, well, you know, it does warm you, emotionally. Less so. Superstition weaves its way in too. An old man once told you to sleep with garlic tucked under your arm to distract the frost. A neighbor hangs a little wooden charm above her bed carved with symbols that supposedly ward off frozen spirits. You copied it. Yours looks more like a potato than a charm, but hey, intent counts. Historians catalog these treatments with curious amusement. You live them with hopeful despair, because even if they don't work, they give you something to do, a way to fight back. A ritual that says, I'm not giving up yet. And sometimes, against all odds, the swelling fades, the color returns. The pain dulls into a manageable throb, and you thank the garlic, or the onion, or the fire. Whatever worked, please let it work again tomorrow. You wake up already hurting. Before your eyes open, before your feet touch the ground, you're aware of the ache. Your fingers are stiff, your knees click when you shift. Your skin itches, your back pulls, your heels throb with that familiar sting from yesterday's cold floor. This is what it means to live through winter. Not a battle, but a long, uncomfortable truce. You're not in agony. Not exactly. That would be easier in a strange way, something big and dramatic you could point at. But no, this is quieter. A low-grade buzz of misery. Your joints complain, your lips crack. Your eyelids feel tight. You stretch and every part of your body answers back with creaks and twinges like old wood. You try not to think about it. If you think about it, it gets worse. So you distract yourself, rubbing your hands together, stomping your feet, pinching the feeling back into your toes. You whistle through your teeth while tying your cloak. It helps a little, There's no word for it in your language, but the feeling is universal. It's discomfort that wears you, like a second, slightly too small skin. You go to bed with it, you wake up with it, and you carry it through your day like a bundle of sticks no one else can help you with. Historians rarely write about the little aches. They focus on famine and war, saints and kings. But you know the small stuff, the chapped lips, the persistent cough, the tender spot on your hip where the straw always pokes through the mattress. That's what defines winter. Not great moments of suffering, just the unrelenting almosts. You almost twist your ankle on the frozen path to the well. You almost cry when the cold water touches your cracked hands. You almost snap at your child for asking for more bread you don't have, but you don't. You carry on, because everyone around you is doing the same. You see the same winces, the same limps, the same sighs hidden behind smiles. Misery loves company, yes, but company also softens the misery. You exchange jokes with your neighbor while both of you scratch at your wrists. You and your cousin argue over who has the worst chilblains, laughing in between exaggerated groans. You share warmth, yes, but also resilience, so you keep going. You pack more straw into your boots. You rub lard on your knuckles. You sit by the fire, even if the smoke makes your eyes water, because comfort isn't about luxury. It's about not giving up. And tonight, when you crawl back into bed, sore and itchy and cold again, you know it'll be the same tomorrow. But at least you'll have made it through. You've always heard that the Lord's hall is warm, that it's filled with roaring fires, thick tapestries, heavy cloaks made of real fur, not the mangy patchwork stuff peasants like you wear. It's said that just stepping inside is like entering another season. A place where winter loses its grip and the chill stops at the door. So when you're invited, or rather summoned, to help with repairs at the manor, you shuffle over with a strange kind of anticipation. It's not excitement exactly. Just hope. Hope that maybe, just for a few hours, you'll thaw out somewhere your breath doesn't fog with every word. You arrive early. The manor looms ahead, its timber beams dusted with snow, its roof more intact than most cottages you've seen. A servant meets you at the side door. No one enters through the front, unless they're nobility or trouble. You wipe your boots, try not to stare, and step inside. It's not what you expected. Yes, it's bigger. Taller ceilings, thicker walls, real windows with glass. Well, one of them has glass. The rest are covered in waxed linen, same as home. The floor is stone, not dirt, which sounds fancy until you realize it's even colder. The fire? A modest blaze in a wide hearth that seems better at producing smoke than warmth. You edge closer to it and realize it only heats the 6 feet directly in front of it. The rest of the room might as well be outside. There are servants bustling about in cloaks. Indoors, one poor girl is carrying a tray while wearing mittens. A boy sweeping the corner has icicles in his hair. The Lord is nowhere to be seen, of course. He's probably near a better fire, in a private chamber with a proper chimney. You glance around and realize you're warmer from moving than from anything in this so-called warm room. Historians sometimes describe great halls as centers of hospitality and comfort, maybe in summer. Right now, it's just a larger, draftier version of home with more furniture you're not allowed to touch. Still, there are moments. The tapestries on the wall really do help block the breeze. One corner near the hearth is almost cozy, and someone offers you a mug of ale, lukewarm but not frozen. You take it gratefully, nodding as if this is exactly the experience you were expecting. You know better now. The warmth of nobility isn't about temperature, it's about access. About whose fire is tended and whose fingers get to stay warm. The manor isn't immune to the cold, it just hides it behind prettier walls. You finish your work with cold hands and colder toes. As you leave, you glance back at the warm room and smile. Your cottage might be smaller, dirtier, louder, but at least the pig lets you sit near the fire. From the outside, the manor looks like a fortress of comfort. Stone walls, real chimneys, slate roofs that actually slope the right way. You've imagined it often, roaring hearths in every room, beds piled with furs, warm baths drawn by cheerful servants humming tunes in key. A place where the wind knocks politely, but is never let in. So when you're inside, the disappointment lands quietly but thoroughly. The Great Hall is spacious, yes, but spacious isn't cozy. It's vast and echoing, a barn with banners. The fire, though grand and wide, is set at one end. Heat doesn't travel. It stays stubbornly by the logs, radiating in lazy waves that vanish before they reach your toes. And the cold. It's clever. It slides down the tall walls, slips across the stone floor like mist, and coils under benches and tables. You keep shifting your weight, thinking you're standing in a draft. You are, but so is everyone else. The walls are lined with tapestries which help. Sort of. Mostly they serve as decoration. Faded scenes of knights and saints and battles no one here remembers. One has a hole where mice chewed through the corner. You wonder if they were trying to escape the cold too. Servants bustle in every direction, cloaks pulled tight, hands raw from work. Their cheeks are red, their breath visible, and their eyes half-lidded with fatigue. You notice they hover near the kitchen doors, not because the food is there, but because it's the warmest spot in the whole manor. A stew pot on the coals, some rising steam. It's heaven in a drafty world. The noble family, they're behind a curtain at the far end. There's a rumor of a brazier in there. Maybe two. You imagine them seated in furs, sipping warm wine and listening to a lute. Or maybe they're just cold and cranky in more expensive clothing. Historians write about lords living in luxury compared to peasants. And sure, there's more space, better food, actual chairs instead of stools, but warmth. That's harder to measure. When you're indoors and can still see your breath, all the fancy tapestries in the world start to look like very elaborate scarves. You wander the edge of the hall, brushing your fingers along carved wooden panels, admiring the stained glass in the chapel alcove. It's beautiful. Genuinely. But your nose is running, your feet are numb, and you're starting to miss the goat's breath in your cottage back home. This place isn't warm, it's impressive. It's built to make a statement, not a cozy bed. Even the fire, roaring proudly at the far end, is more for show than comfort. You realize that warmth isn't just about temperature, it's about feeling welcome. About shared heat and familiar sounds. You tighten your cloak and glance toward the side door. Maybe nobility comes with power and space. But you'd trade both for a stool beside your own stubborn little hearth. You thought maybe the servants had it better. Not better, but at least warmer. Closer to the fire, moving all the time, maybe slipping scraps of roast into their mouths when no one's watching. But after a day inside the manor, you learn the truth. Servants freeze just like you do, sometimes worse. They wear more layers, sure, but they're still thin, patched, and barely better than what you've got. A few have cloaks handed down from retired chambermaids or discarded by the lord's children when they outgrew them. You can tell because the hems drag and the seams are stitched with different colored thread, like someone was trying to reassemble dignity out of old sleeves. Most servants are in motion constantly. That's how they stay warm. It's not a luxury, it's survival. If you stand still too long, the cold gets in. It snakes up your boots, down your collar, into your bones. So they move. They stir pots, sweep ash, carry logs, and chase chickens out of the chapel vestibule, all while silently praying for tasks that involve the kitchen or, in a perfect world, the laundry hearth. You watch a scullery boy rinse dishes in a trough of water that's steaming only because it was boiled moments ago. His hands are beet red, his knuckles cracked, and he doesn't flinch when the wind comes through the open passageway. He just exhales, wipes his hands on his tunic, and goes on. You recognize that look. It's the same one you wear when your fingers go numb, and you pretend not to notice. Historians sometimes paint a picture of servant life as sheltered compared to the peasants outside the manor walls. Maybe in summer, but in winter, stone is just as cold whether you're rich or poor. The difference is who gets to be near the fire and how long they're allowed to stay. You overhear a maid mutter under her breath about the frost on her sleeping mat. She shares a cramped loft above the pantry with two others. There's no hearth up there, only a blanket of breath and the scent of potatoes. One of them once lit a candle for warmth. The steward nearly lost his mind. Even in the main hall, they're expected to stand straight, quiet, and still. A tremble from the cold, understandable. A shiver that disrupts the Lord's meal. Grounds for scolding, so they learn to hide it, to wrap their toes in spare linen, to tuck their hands under trays, to smile even as their lips crack. You nod at one of the girls carrying a pitcher. She gives you a quick smile, then turns away before her teeth start chattering. You both know the game. Warmth isn't handed out in the manner. It's earned, stolen, or improvised. And sometimes it's just imagined. It's not that there isn't a fire. There is, a big one, crackling, lively, full of orange flame, and the occasional heroic spark that leaps like it's auditioning for a ballad. But no matter how much it roars, it doesn't reach the corners. You notice this right away. Step even a little away from the hearth, and the warmth vanishes like it was never there. It clings to the fire pit like a jealous child, refusing to share. Your nose starts to run, your breath clouds again. The hem of your cloak stiffens, that's how fast it fades. The Lord sits near the blaze, of course. His chair is practically in the fire, and still he's wearing gloves. His boots steam faintly. You wonder if even he is warm, or if nobility just makes you better at pretending. But most of the room, cold. The shadows flicker on the stone walls, and you can see your own breath every time you sigh. Which is often, you stand with your back to a tapestry hoping it'll trap a bit of body heat. It doesn't. You try stamping your feet. It echoes too loudly. You stop. There's a woman spinning wool in the corner. Her fingers are wrapped in cloth strips, and she's using her elbows to keep her shawl from slipping. She keeps leaning forward as if her body's trying to migrate toward the fire by sheer force of will. Her spindle wobbles. You know that wobble. It's the tremor of someone who hasn't been warm in hours. Historians love to describe medieval fireplaces as centers of household life. True enough, but they forget to mention the limits. There's no insulation. No glass panes, just drafty walls and high ceilings that gulp down heat like greedy mouths. The fire gives what it can, but it's like heating a barn with a candle. You shift closer to the flame, hoping no one notices. You stop just shy of the invisible line that divides welcome warmth from don't linger there unless you're nobility. You know your place. Everyone does. Even the fire seems to know. It flickers in sympathy. Or maybe it's just the wind through the window cracks. Eventually, you're called to finish your task. A bit of repair work, a delivery, maybe just sweeping a floor no one will thank you for. You leave the glow behind and step back into the chill of the outer hall where frost clings to the walls and the torch smoke hangs low in the air. The manor isn't without fire. It just doesn't share it easily. You pull your cloak tight, turn your face away from the breeze, and make your way toward the side door. You're going home soon. And even if your fire's smaller, even if your walls leak more and your floor is made of dirt and straw, at least the warmth reaches you. Winter slows everything down, except the spinning wheel. When the fields go quiet and the ground turns too hard for planting or digging, the work turns inward. That's when the wool comes out. Sacks of it, matted and musty, saved from the summer shearing and stored in a corner that still smells faintly of sheep and sunshine. Now, in the depth of the cold, it's your task to turn it into something warm. Thread, cloth maybe, if you're lucky, a new blanket. Or at least a sleeve that doesn't whistle when the wind hits it. You start with the teasing. You take handfuls of the wool and pull it apart, gently loosening the clumps and working out the burrs and bits of straw the sheep so generously left behind. It's slow work, slow. Quiet work. Your fingers stiffen quickly in the cold, so you sit close to the hearth, rubbing them together every few minutes until they remember how to move. Then comes carding, using 2 boards with little teeth to comb the fibers into soft, manageable tufts. It feels like brushing a ghost. The sound is soft, a rhythmic rasp that fills the room like a whisper. The children help sometimes. One of them sings a little spinning rhyme under their breath, passed down from someone's grandmother's grandmother. You don't remember all the words, but the tune is soothing, familiar. Next is spinning. If you've got a spindle, you use that. If you've got a wheel, you're fortunate. Most likely, you spin by hand. The fibers twist between your fingers, pulling into a fine thread that winds around the spindle like a long, soft promise. It takes hours to make enough for anything useful. Days, even. But time moves differently in winter. Historians often speak of spinning as women's work, and it is. But it's also village work. Everyone helps. Everyone wears the results. The yarn you twist today might become your neighbor's hat next week, your child's mittens next month, or next year's blanket that 5 people will sleep under. You save every scrap, even the uneven threads, the ones too short or lumpy, get rewoven into patches, binding cloth, even rope. Nothing is wasted. Every fiber matters when the wind screams outside and the snow taps on the shutter like it wants to come in. There's satisfaction in this quiet labor. It's not loud, it's not glorious, but when the wool begins to take shape in your lap, soft, warm, real, you feel a little more powerful. Like you've spun some small control out of the season's endless gray. You glance at the fire, still burning low, but steady. You turn the spindle again. The snow can keep falling. You'll keep spinning. There's homemade wool, and then there's market wool, and you know the difference as soon as you touch it. Your own spun wool is thick, scratchy, and a little lumpy in spots. It's warm, dependable, and stubborn, like the sheep it came from. It has a faint smell of smoke and lanolin in your own hands, and when you wrap yourself in something made from it, you feel a little closer to your own labor. You made this. You teased it, carded it, spun it, maybe even wove it with a borrowed loom. It's not pretty, but it does the job. Market wool, on the other hand, is like touching someone else's daydream. Smoother, softer, more even. It's been processed by professional spinners in towns you've never visited, dyed in colors you can't pronounce, and priced high enough to make your eyes water. You once saw a merchant roll out a length of crimson wool so fine it moved like water. You stood there, mouth open, fingers twitching, knowing you'd never afford even a sleeve of it. Still, a bit of market wool does make its way into your home now and then, usually through trade. A neighbor swaps a bundle for eggs. Someone's aunt brings back offcuts from town. You inherit a sleeve or a scarf that's clearly made of something better than anything your sheep ever grew. It becomes a treasure, folded, mended, patched, then passed on again. There's no shame in homemade wool, not at all, but there's a quiet reverence for the market kind. You might line a collar with it, edge a baby's blanket with it, use it sparingly, like sugar or salt, to make the rough world feel a little softer. Historians talk a lot about the medieval wool trade, how it fueled economies, financed wars, made kings rich. But out here, wool isn't politics, it's survival. It's what you wrap around your children when the fire burns low. It's what you stitch into a hole in your only tunic. It's what keeps you from losing fingers to frostbite when you have to walk a mile in the snow just to borrow a pot. And yes, you dream of a whole blanket made from market wool, a real one, dyed deep blue, maybe with fringe, the kind nobles don't even notice draped over their chairs. You imagine wrapping yourself in it and hearing nothing but silence as the wind slams against your walls and gives up. But until that miracle finds you, you'll keep spinning your own. It may be coarse, it may be uneven, but it's warm and it's yours. You own one blanket. Well, maybe 2, if you count the patched sheet of burlap your cousin swears used to be part of a monk's cloak. But the real blanket, the thick, scratchy, woolen one that's been passed down more times than you can remember, that one is the treasure. It's not beautiful. Not anymore. If it ever was, time and need have long since worn away the evidence. The original color, perhaps a rich brown or deep gray, has faded into a murky something. It smells faintly of smoke, garlic, and generations. One corner is held together with stitches so large and uneven They could be mistaken for a child's attempt at embroidery, but it's whole. Mostly, and more importantly, it's warm. You remember sleeping under it as a child, wrapped between your parents, the edges tucked beneath your feet to keep the drafts out. You remember waking to frost on the inside of the window, but your toes still warm from the heat the blanket had trapped overnight. You remember your grandmother patching it by candlelight, muttering about thread tension and how no one these days stitches with respect. Now it's your turn to keep it alive. You fold it carefully every morning, never on the floor. Always on a bench or a peg, you shake it out by the fire, brushing off the stray bits of straw and whatever else the goat may have tracked in, and when a hole opens up, you patch it. Not elegantly, but with intention. Each square of newer wool tells its own story. The harvest, when your sister got married. The winter, the baby wouldn't stop crying. The year the snow came early and left late. Historians sometimes write about textiles in terms of trade, export, production. But in your house, textiles are legacy. That blanket is more than fabric. It's memory. It's protection. It's the one item that everyone reaches for first when the wind rattles the walls and the fire burns low, when the baby is sick, when someone comes in shaking from a walk through the storm. You share it, of course. No one owns it outright. The family huddles beneath it at night, shifting and squirming and fighting for their fair share of the warmth. It covers feet, backs, and occasionally the dog, though he always ends up halfway out, snoring. Sometimes, when the house is quiet, you sit with the blanket over your shoulders and trace the stitches with your fingers. They're not all yours. Some are your mother's. A few might even be your grandfather's. You imagine them sitting where you are, needle in hand, fighting the same cold, whispering the same tired prayers. This isn't just a blanket. It's the closest thing your family has to an heirloom, and tonight it will keep you alive, again. You don't really inherit money, or land, or jewelry. What you inherit is wool, passed not in chests or sealed scrolls, but in bundles and layers, in scarves with frayed edges, in mittens with fingers that bend a little too much. You inherit your mother's winter tunic, patched again at the elbow. You inherit your grandfather's wool socks, each one a slightly different length. You inherit the blanket, always the blanket. When a child is born, someone pulls a swaddling cloth from the trunk, a square of soft, well-loved wool that's been wrapped around every baby in the family for as long as anyone can remember. It smells of rosemary, ashes, and thyme. The infant doesn't care. They wriggle, yawn, and settle into its warmth like they were always meant to be there. When someone dies, you lay them out with wool too. You tuck the old shawl around their shoulders. You place a hand-woven scrap over their chest. It's not just for comfort. It's a mark of care, of dignity. Even in death, no one should be cold. These pieces of wool aren't labeled or signed, but everyone knows their history. That sleeve from the year of the hard frost, that tunic lining, cut from a borrowed blanket when there wasn't enough to go around. That patch with the crooked blue thread, done by a cousin with shaky hands but a big heart. You teach the children how to care for it all, how to wash wool in cold water, how to dry it slowly near the fire, never over it. How to sew with strong knots, how to fold things neatly even when no one's watching. They grumble, of course. They always do, but then the wind picks up and someone reaches for a hand-me-down cloak, and they understand. Historians might one day find your woolen scraps and see them as simple artifacts. Tools, rags, but you know better. They're pieces of memory, each one wrapped around someone you loved, someone who stood where you now stand, hunched near the same fire, threading the same needle, and when the time comes, you'll pass your wool down too. Not because it's rare, not because it's beautiful, but because it's warm. Because it's yours. Because someone, years from now, will shiver, reach for it, and remember that they were never the first to feel cold. And they were never alone. You'd like to think of sleep as one long, blissful stretch, drifting off beside the fire, wrapped in wool, and waking up with the rooster. But winter doesn't work like that. Not here. Not in this cottage, with the wind pressing at the shutters and the goat sighing dramatically in her sleep. Instead, your night is made up of little scraps of sleep, stitched together like one of your patched tunics. You sleep for a few hours, wake for no reason, shift your leg, scratch your scalp, and try again. Then someone else stirs. A child rolls over, the pig sneezes, the dog shuffles in his dreams. Then you're up again. The first interruption usually comes when the fire dies. You feel it, a change in the air, not dramatic, just a slow retreat of warmth that creeps in through your toes. You open your eyes to darkness and the soft sound of nothing. The fire's embers glow faintly like eyes watching you from across the room. You curse gently under your breath and crawl out of your blanket nest to add more wood or dung or whatever fuel you can find in the pile you swore you'd restock yesterday. You return to bed with cold fingers and more questions. Why does your knee hurt again? Was the goat just snoring or choking on something? And what was that noise by the door? Wind, probably. Or the neighbor's pig, again. You pull the blanket over your head and try to forget about it. You sleep again, for a while. Until someone coughs. Then the baby stirs. Then you feel the undeniable, creeping, unwelcome realization. You need to pee. There's no chamber pot. There was one, but it cracked last winter and no one's replaced it. You think about holding it. You really do, but eventually, with an exaggerated sigh, you shuffle outside, boots half-laced, cloak over your head, breath fogging like a dragon. The sky is full of stars. It's quiet, beautiful even, you don't care. Your feet are freezing. Back inside, it takes time to settle. Your spot is colder now. Someone rolled into it while you were gone and left behind a damp foot. You steal it back anyway. You huddle in again. The fire's flickering. You close your eyes. Historians sometimes romanticize pre-industrial sleep, two natural sleep phases with a period of quiet wakefulness between. You suppose they're not wrong. You do wake in the middle of the night. You do sit up, sometimes whispering stories or prayers or just waiting. But it's less about philosophy and more about the dog snoring into your armpit and the wind rattling your soul. Eventually sleep takes you again, not because it's perfect, but because it's enough. And when the rooster crows, you're never sure whether you slept at all or just paused your exhaustion for a few hours. It starts small. You wake up because of the cold, or the creak of a board, or the baby fussing in her sleep, and instead of just rolling over, something in your brain whispers, "Since you're up anyway," so you do a chore, just one, just something little to make the morning easier. You tell yourself it won't take long. You add fuel to the fire, sure, that's expected. But then you notice the water pot is nearly empty. You sigh. You light a stub of tallow and tiptoe to the jug in the corner, hoping it hasn't frozen solid again. It has. You curse gently, slap your hands together to keep the blood moving, and move on. Then you spot the breadcloth. It slipped off the loaf you left to rise beside the fire. You lift the cloth, touch the dough, and sigh again. It's sluggish, cold, and barely risen. You turn the pot a little closer to the fire. You whisper at it like a gardener coaxing a seed in winter. Your spouse stirs and grunts something. You reply with, "Just checking," which in winter peasant speak means, "I'm now fully awake and elbows deep in quiet emergencies." Someone's sock is on the floor, damp and stiff from being worn through. You drape it by the hearth without thinking. The goat, restless, has started chewing on the hem of your eldest's blanket. You shoo her away with a finger pressed to your lips. She belches and resumes chewing in the opposite direction. Midnight chores aren't glamorous. No one thanks you for them, but they've become their own rhythm, as natural as breath. Fix a crack. Stir the ashes. Rub warmth into the baby's feet. Shake out a blanket. Whisper a prayer. Listen to the wind. Return to bed with dirtier hands than you had an hour ago. Historians might not list these under chores, but you do, because they're work, because they matter. Because they help you survive, not just physically, but mentally. They let you feel a little control over the dark. You don't finish everything. You never do. You patch what you can, then fold back under the covers, the warmth a little more earned than before. Sleep doesn't come quickly. But it comes. Of all the midnight routines, fire checking and blanket re-stealing are the most sacred. They're not official duties. No one assigns them, but everyone does them, quietly. Automatically. Like breathing or scratching, the fire check comes first. The flames have usually sunk to a faint red glow, buried under ash like a sleeping animal. You lean close, squinting in the dark. You don't poke it yet. You listen first. Is it still breathing? If there's heat, you add something. Wood if you're rich in luck. Dung if you're not. A scrap of broken stool if it's a desperate night. You blow gently, coaxing life from the embers. The fire huffs, flickers, then catches. It's the one part of your world that responds to patience. Then comes the blankets. No matter how carefully you arrange them at bedtime, by midnight they've shifted, twisted, and migrated entirely to the other side of the bed. Someone always hogs more than their share, usually the smallest person in the house. You find your legs exposed to the cold, your shoulders uncovered, your dignity somewhere near the goat. You reach out slowly, gently, like a soldier diffusing a sleeping bomb. You lift one edge of the blanket and inch it back over your chest. Then your knees, then daring greatly your feet. If you're lucky, no one wakes. If you're unlucky, someone grunts, rolls, and pulls it all the way back in the other direction like a tug of war you never agreed to. Sometimes you get creative. You slide your arm underneath the pile and drag it your way by stealth. Other times you grab a separate scrap of cloth and make peace with a half-warm torso. Historians don't mention this dance. They speak of shared beds, communal sleeping, but not the nightly game of thermal diplomacy. The whispered battle for fabric and flame. You lie there, finally recovered, staring at the ceiling. The fire crackles. A baby sighs. Somewhere the dog passes gas and ruins everything briefly. But then silence settles again. And maybe, just maybe, you fall asleep for a little while, perfectly still, perfectly warm, with the blanket entirely your own. Until someone rolls over and takes it again. You never really sleep in silence. Even in the middle of the night, when the fire has dimmed and the wind has momentarily stopped rattling the shutters, your world hums. A low, muffled orchestra of life continuing around you, and somehow it helps you sleep, not despite the sounds, but because of them. The dog twitches in his sleep, feet kicking at some dream only he understands. A chicken above you in the rafters makes a sudden, judgmental cluck and then goes still again. You hear someone's breath, a slow, steady rhythm, slightly whistling through a crooked tooth. The baby lets out a sleepy grumble and nestles deeper into their blanket cocoon. The sounds don't disturb you. They ground you, remind you that the house is full, that everyone made it through another day, that the roof is still holding, the fire is still breathing, and your family, ragged and itchy and cold as they may be, are all here, packed together like spoons in a wooden drawer. A pig snorts. A goat shifts her weight. You think you hear the faint crack of ice retreating from the edge of the water pot by the door. All of it, somehow, is comforting. Outside, the wind starts up again. It's slow at first, then faster, dragging icy fingers across the edges of the shutters, searching for a way in. You curl tighter beneath the blanket. It tries, the wind, but it doesn't get far. You hear the fire pop, a spark jumping, ash settling. Someone else stirs, tucks a foot under a warmer body, and sighs. You let your eyes close again. Historians talk about the medieval night as dangerous, unknown, even chaotic. But you know better. The night isn't a villain, it's a tired friend. A long sigh, a blanket with a few holes, a time when the world grows small and slow, and your own breath sounds louder than the trees. You doze, Not deep sleep, but something gentler, lighter. A place where your dreams and your surroundings blur at the edges. You dream of bread, of sunlight on thatch, of a blanket that covers everyone all at once. You wake again an hour later, or maybe two. Someone shifted, someone mumbled something about eggs. You check the fire. Still glowing. You don't get up this time. You just breathe in the smoky, sheep-scented air of your home and close your eyes once more. Because this is what sleep looks like here. It's not 8 hours of silence. It's a rhythm. A patchwork quilt of half-dreams, fire checks, and soft sounds. And for now, it's enough. Some nights, when the wind won't stop and your fingers ache from pulling the blanket back over your shoulders for the 5th time, the only thing that gets you through is the promise of not this. You lie there, eyes half open, staring at the low flicker of the fire, and you let your mind drift. Slowly. Sleepily, to a place that smells less like smoke and damp straw, and more like fresh bread and sun-warmed earth. You think of spring. Not a poetic spring with flowers and birds and dancing maypoles, just a simple one. Mud instead of ice. Breezes that carry warmth instead of curses. Days long enough to see your own feet in the morning. You imagine green poking up through the snow. Not much. Just a brave little blade of grass, reminding you that the ground is still alive under all that cold. You dream of food, too. Real food. Hot, heavy, celebratory food. You picture a feast so grand your belly grumbles just thinking of it. Roast root vegetables with crispy skins, a stew so thick your spoon stands up in it, and a crust of bread that doesn't crack your tooth when you bite it. Maybe even butter. You can taste the butter. The mind is generous in the middle of the night. You imagine socks. Yes, clean ones, made of new wool, not hand-me-downs with holes at the toes and mysterious stains no one can remember. You picture pulling them on in the morning and feeling warmth instead of resignation. You dream of a tunic that hasn't been patched 17 times, one that drapes instead of clings. Sometimes your thoughts drift toward things even more luxurious. Hot baths, soft beds, no lice. A pillow, maybe, just the idea of a pillow filled with goose down and not straw that pokes you in the ear. A room with a door that keeps the cold out all night. And no goat. You chuckle softly to yourself and shift on the mat. The goat grunts beside you as if offended. You ignore her. She has her own dreams, probably of turnips and causing trouble. Historians often ask what gave peasants hope during winter. The answer isn't always spiritual or philosophical. Sometimes it's soup. Sometimes it's the thought of warm dirt between your fingers, or the memory of last year's midsummer feast. Sometimes it's the quiet belief that next year's blanket will be thicker, the fire will be easier to start, and the socks, oh, the socks, will be glorious. These dreams don't fix the cold, they don't light the fire or patch the roof. But they make you close your eyes just a little more gently, and they carry you, one hopeful thought at a time, toward morning. The fire's low. Your toes are cold. You just hit your head on the underside of the loft beam for the 3rd time this week, and yet someone makes a joke. It's not a good one. Something about the goat being the warmest family member, but also the smelliest. Or maybe it's the one about your neighbor's chicken who keeps laying eggs on top of the thatch like she's better than everyone. You've heard it before dozens of times, but tonight it makes you laugh anyway. A tired, quiet nose snort of a laugh, the best kind. That's what gets you through more than anything. The jokes, the groans, the complaints that dance so close to whining, they practically hold hands. The shared sarcasm of survival. You sit around the fire with your family, bundled in cloaks and sarcasm, and someone sighs, "I think my socks froze to my feet." Another replies, "Good." Maybe now they'll finally stay on. The baby squeals, the dog sneezes, and somehow everyone's smiling. You complain together, loudly, lovingly. About the cold, about the wood that won't catch, about the scratchy blanket. About how you're definitely going to sleep for 10 days straight when spring comes. Complaints here aren't signs of misery. They're little bursts of solidarity, rituals almost. You whine because it's tradition, because everyone else is doing it, because it helps. Historians don't always mention this, the running commentary of a freezing household, but you know it's real. You've seen people bond over soggy boots and lumpy straw mattresses. You've witnessed your siblings turn an itchy rash into a comedy routine. Your cousin once gave a dramatic monologue from the perspective of a frozen turnip. You still talk about it. You're not laughing at the cold, you're laughing through it. You're poking fun at the same discomforts that made you cry a week ago. That's the trick. That's the power. The jokes might be stale, but they're warm, and they're yours. And when the fire finally catches, or the blanket is passed your way, or someone manages to warm up a bowl of something resembling soup, you celebrate. Not with cheering, but with a sarcastic, "Oh, finally," and a shared grin. It's not just humor, it's resilience in disguise. And the complaints? They're little acknowledgments. This is hard. This is ridiculous. This is uncomfortable. But because you say it together, it becomes easier to bear. The goat stomps near the hearth. Someone mutters, "She's planning something." You nod solemnly. Probably to steal the firewood again. You all shake your heads like wise elders who've seen this too many times. And the cold, still there, but somehow it shrinks just a little. So you keep laughing, you keep whining, you keep teasing each other as the wind howls outside and the blanket once again fails to cover your feet. Because in this world of frost and fleas, complaining with love is its own kind of warmth. There's not much luxury in your world, not the velvet-robed, gold-plated kind, at least. But winter teaches you that comfort doesn't have to be grand. Sometimes it's a hot stone wrapped in cloth. Sometimes it's a crust of bread that still feels soft in the middle. Sometimes it's a moment, 5 quiet seconds by the fire when no one needs anything from you, and the dog isn't snoring directly into your knee. These are your luxuries, small, earned. Sacred. You have your own rituals too. Maybe you warm your socks by the hearth before slipping them on, even though you know they'll go cold again in minutes. Maybe you save the last sip of ale for right before sleep, because it feels like a goodbye kiss to the day. Maybe you wrap your shawl a certain way every night, right shoulder first, then left. And you've convinced yourself it makes a difference, even if it doesn't. You light the same stub of tallow each morning, strike the flint just so, whisper the same phrase under your breath, half blessing, half muscle memory. You do it whether anyone's watching or not, because it feels like an anchor in a season that tries to scatter you like loose straw. There's the good bowl, the one without a crack. You hide it when guests come, saving it for your hands alone. There's the wooden spoon with the curved tip that fits your mouth better than the others. When someone else uses it, you frown but say nothing, then take it back the first chance you get. You have a blanket fold that traps warmth better, a sleeping position that hurts your shoulder less, a way of stirring stew that keeps it from sticking. Little things, but in winter, little things are everything. Historians talk about hardship, scarcity, disease, but they don't always talk about routine, the comforts you build into the cold. The tiny tricks that keep you sane. The way you run your thumb along the same stitch in the blanket every night as you fall asleep. Not because it fixes anything, but because it reminds you that you're still here. Sometimes the luxury is simply not having to get up right away. You sit for a minute longer. You hold the warm mug in your palms until the heat fades. You watch the fire and let your eyes droop, knowing the goat will knock something over soon, but not yet. You don't have riches, but you have rhythm, and that rhythm keeps you steady, even when the roof creaks and the snow keeps falling and the wind whispers that it might never end. You pull the good shawl tighter, you fold the blanket just right, and you begin again. Hope isn't loud. It doesn't come crashing through the door like a feast day or shout its name over the rooftops. It comes in quietly, soft and slow like steam rising from a chipped bowl, or like the first warm breeze of spring brushing your cheek before the snow is even gone. You've learned not to expect grand change, not in one night, not in one season. But you still hope every day, and especially in winter, you treat hope like a kind of ritual. Not a luxury, a necessity. You look at the fire, even when it's low, and tell yourself it'll hold until morning. You look at the dry kindling pile and trust that tomorrow you'll find more, even if you don't know how yet. You hope the goat's milk doesn't dry up. You hope the boots last one more week. You hope the bread rises just enough to be called bread and not hot flour paste. It's not always about believing things will get better soon. It's about believing they can. You wake to aching knees in a room that smells like old wool and damp straw, and you still rise. Not because you're sure the day will be kind, but because you're open to the idea. You do your chores with cracked hands and frozen toes because someone needs to, and because with any luck the sun might peek out for 5 blessed minutes while you do. The children help you hope too. They ask if the snow will melt by tomorrow. You say maybe, though you both know it won't. But the word is a door you leave open on purpose. Your spouse complains about the draft, then tucks the blanket tighter around your shoulders without a word. That's hope too, in wool form. You glance at your sleeping family, a tangle of limbs and snores and elbows, and you let yourself believe that next winter might be easier, even if it isn't. Hope doesn't need proof. It just needs practice. Historians sometimes write about medieval faith as a form of control, but they miss the softer side of belief, the way people like you lean on things they can't see, because what they can see is bitter and gray and endless. You don't hope because it's rational. You hope because it's survival, because without it you wouldn't get up. You wouldn't spin the wool. You wouldn't bother to start the fire one more time, so you do. You repeat the morning rites. You thank the fire when it catches. You whisper to the goat. You tuck the blanket around the baby just a little tighter, and when night comes again and the wind returns, and you find yourself under the same patched blanket with the same cracked hands, you hope again, not because you have to. Because you've made it a habit. It's still cold when it happens. You're not wearing fewer layers. The fire still needs coaxing in the morning. Your breath still clouds the air as you speak, but something changes, not in the way the frost clings to the corners of the window or how the wind rattles the shutters. Those are still there. The change comes in sound, a single note, a birdsong. High, light, almost questioning. You hear it while gathering kindling near the woodshed, the basket bumping against your hip, your fingers stiff with cold. You stop. The goat stops. Even the chickens seem to pause. There it is again. A brief warble, not a cry of warning, not a rustle of wings, but music, the kind that doesn't ask for attention and yet receives it fully. You stand very still. That one sound does something to you. It pokes at something beneath the numbness of routine. Beneath the cracked hands and sleepless nights and stiff knees, it whispers, "It's coming, not yet." But soon, you don't smile, not fully, but the corners of your mouth twitch, and for a moment your shoulders don't feel quite so heavy. You look up, scanning the skeletal trees, trying to spot the brave little singer. You don't see it. You don't need to. It's enough to know it's there. Later that day, you mention it quietly. "I heard a bird." Your spouse raises an eyebrow. The children perk up. One nods solemnly as if you've reported news from the king's court. Birdsong is nothing in summer. You barely notice it then when the trees are full and the air hums with wings. But in winter, it's everything. It's permission to hope out loud. You still chop wood, still milk the goat, still patch the firewood basket with straw and silent frustration. But the sound rings in your memory like a bell. Even that night, wrapped in the same blanket, curled between the dog and a small, snoring child, your ears listen differently. Not for the creak of ice or the rattle of wind, but for the possibility, just the possibility, that you might hear it again. Historians write about calendars and equinoxes, about the official beginning of spring. But for you, it starts here. With one brave bird and a song that slips through the trees like a secret, the thaw will come slowly. Mud will come first. Then aches from the damp, then buds, then storms. You know the pattern, but still, it begins with that one note. You fall asleep wondering if the bird will return. You don't know, but the silence now feels different. It's waiting, not ending. It happens slowly, so slowly you almost miss it. One morning, the snow is still there, but it looks tired, sagging at the edges, thinner on the roof. The path to the well isn't so crunchy underfoot. The drip from the eaves isn't icicles, it's water. Real, honest water, falling in slow, steady drops like the roof is weeping with relief. You tilt your face up, and one drop lands squarely on your nose. Cold, sure, but not biting, not cruel. Just a nudge, a reminder. The snow is changing. It pulls back from the edges of the garden like a tide receding. You see patches of brown, soggy earth peeking through like old secrets. The children poke at the ground with sticks, hoping to find worms. The chickens scratch with more enthusiasm. Even the goat seems smug. Inside, the light is different. Not more, necessarily, but warmer, softer. It slips through the cracks of the shutter in late morning and paints golden shapes on the wall that weren't there a week ago. You pause while spooning gruel into a bowl and just watch it, just for a second. You don't say anything. Not yet. Don't want to scare it off. The sun still disappears quickly, and the nights are still cold enough to bite your toes if you forget your second pair of socks. But something in the timing has changed. Dusk is slower to arrive. You find yourself working a bit later before the dark nudges you back inside. And that feeling, that subtle shift in rhythm, it seeps into everything. The bread rises a little faster. The dough is less sulky. The water in the jug doesn't freeze overnight. The goat's milk feels slightly warmer, as if she's adjusting to the world again. Even the fire, though still needed, feels less like a battlefield and more like a gentle companion. Historians might call this a transitional season, the hinge between winter and spring. You call it maybe we'll plant soon. Maybe the baby's cough will ease. Maybe the roof won't leak this year. Maybe that patch of mud by the door will grow something green again. You start to open the door a little wider during the day. Let in the light. The air still smells like damp wool and wood smoke, but now there's something else beneath it. Something clean, something that smells like not winter. You don't dance, you don't shout, but you walk outside and stand for a long moment, staring at the spot where snow used to cover everything. You breathe in, deep. The sun kisses your face just barely. And inside, without words, something in you begins to thaw. You don't pack them away all at once. You're not that bold. But one day, you notice the extra cloak hasn't been used in 3 mornings. It's still hanging by the door, still smells like smoke and sheep, still weighs the same. But no one's reached for it. That's where it starts. First, the wool wraps. You fold them carefully, slowly, shaking out the crumbs and dog hair, pressing your hands flat along the worn edges. You whisper to the fabric like it's a tired friend who finally gets to rest. Not goodbye, you murmur. Just see you later. Then into the chest they go, layered gently on top of one another, like sleeping cats. The heavy socks follow. You mend a few holes first, just in case next winter comes early. Then you roll them into soft lumps and place them beside the wraps. You almost feel bad. They've been your companions, your armor, your quiet mutter of defiance. But your toes haven't ached in 3 days. That's the rule. 3 days without frostbite. Socks go in the chest. The goat no longer sleeps inside. She's moved out voluntarily, which you take as a sign, holier than any calendar. She's claimed her corner of the yard again, stubborn and smug. You miss her warmth by the fire, but not the midnight chewing noises or the tiny hoof prints on your sleeping mat. The firewood stack isn't refilled every night now. You still light a fire, of course. Spring is a flirtatious thing, and the evenings still nip. But it's no longer your obsession. You even forget once, and no one wakes up shivering. That's new. That's something worth smiling about. The tallow stubs, the thickest shawl, the blanket liner made of stitched-together scraps, you fold them all. Each item tells a story, of a night you nearly froze, of a morning the dough wouldn't rise, of a toe that went numb and came back grumpier than before. You stack those memories, not to forget them, but to honor them. They got you here. Historians love to record kings and conquests, but you think someone should document this. The quiet ritual of survival giving way to something softer. The way the inside of the cottage smells different now, less like wet wool, more like sun-warmed wood. The way you don't flinch when the wind knocks anymore. You just raise your eyebrows and say, "Try again next year." You don't put everything away, not yet. That would be tempting fate, but you tuck the blanket deeper into the chest and leave the lid open, just a crack. You know cold will come again. That's how life works, but for now, you've earned this moment, this light, this quiet victory. You run your hand across the folded cloth one last time and whisper, "Thank you," and then you shut the lid. Just when you think it's over, when the sun has lingered a little longer and you've dared to open the shutters without flinching, winter returns. Not loud, not angry, just one last cold night. It slides in after dusk, silent and confident, as if to remind you who's been in charge these past months. The wind shifts, the sky sharpens. You feel it in your teeth, in the way the floor feels cruel again beneath your bare feet. The air carries that unmistakable scent, not just cold, but returning cold. A final breath from a season that doesn't like to leave without a word. You go through the motions, fire first, extra straw in the corner. You bring the wool blanket back out, not out of panic, but as insurance. You even set a hot stone near the foot of the bed again. It's like welcoming an old guest you hoped wouldn't return, but still made up a space for, just in case. The house falls quiet. The children are tucked in tight. The dog curls closer than usual. Even the goat, who's been sleeping outside all week, presses against the wall of the cottage, as if reconsidering her independence. You don't resent the cold this time. Not really. You just acknowledge it. One last frost, one more night to get through. You know what to do. You've done it before. You sleep lightly. Wake once to check the fire. Stir the embers. Tuck the blanket tighter around the little one's feet. Listen to the wind and nod, as if to say, "I see you." And in the early hours, so early it's still dark, you hear it. Silence. But not the heavy, muffled kind of deep winter. This is the hollow kind, the finished kind, the kind that comes after something, not before. No more rattling of the shutters, no icy breath on the back of your neck, just stillness. And then, very faintly, the chirp of that bird again. You sit up slowly, rubbing your eyes, watching the pale light push through the cracks in the shutters. You open them. Carefully. The frost is there, but soft this time, already loosening its grip on the edges of the windowsill. You step outside, barefoot, just for a second, and place your heel on the earth. It's cold, but not punishing. You breathe deep. The cold is fading. You've made it. Now, no need to move. You've done enough for one night. You've walked through the snow, banked the fire, chased the goat, scratched your scalp, stirred the pot, checked the corners, tucked the blanket. You've carried the weight of winter in your arms and over your shoulders, and still you kept going. So now you can stop. Feel the room settle. Let the edges blur. Let the last ember in the hearth glow dim and soft. There's no draft now. No need to get up, no socks to pull tighter, no chores whispering for attention. Just the still warmth of a house that has survived the season. Maybe your hands are still a little rough, maybe the blanket's still a little short. But you're wrapped in it anyway, And tonight, even if just for these few quiet minutes, you are not cold, the world outside will do what it wants. The wind may come again, the sky may darken, but for now, it doesn't matter. Because you are here, inside resting. And the fire still glows, so go ahead, sink deeper into the straw. Let your shoulders drop, let your fingers unfurl. You don't need to listen for the goat. You don't need to chase the blanket, you just need to breathe. Let the last flickers of light fade from your thoughts. Let the rhythm of your breath take you somewhere quieter, slower, softer. Sleep now, you've made it through the winter. You're warm, you're safe, you're home. Sweet dreams.